What if the sorrow you carry in silence is the memory of a war your soul once survived? What if I told you that before the first cities rose, before the oceans found their names, a hidden conflict shook the heavens, and its echo still trembles inside your dreams? Have you ever wondered why certain stories feel older than the earth itself, like something you did not learn, but something you somehow remember? There was a time when angels walked the winds, when giants ruled the valleys, when the first rebellion split the sky like a wounded star. And though the dust has long settled, the truth has not. It waits in the quiet places, drifting like forgotten light. If you stay with me, you will remember the world before the flood, the secret covenants, the forbidden unions, the ancient watchers whose choices shaped every dawn that followed. And if you leave, a door will close, perhaps forever. So breathe and listen. The forgotten will rise again before the night is over. If your soul still remembers the light, stay with us. Subscribe and walk this ancient path once more. Every story here is a lamp for the wandering heart. In the beginning, before the first river carved its path, or the first seed opened its small green heart to the sun, there was only a great and endless quiet. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of perfect harmony, where every breath of light moved in agreement with every other. This was heaven before sorrow, before longing, before the first shadow dared to tremble against the brightness. The angels moved through that radiance like living hymns, their voices soft as drifting fire, their thoughts woven with the ease of wind brushing across still waters. They knew nothing of distance, nothing of fear, nothing of the ache that would one day rest behind every human rib. They knew only the warmth of divine nearness, a nearness so complete that even the thought of separation felt impossible, unthinkable, like trying to imagine a sky without its colors. Yet, in that perfect harmony, there stirred the smallest ripple, faint as the sigh of a distant star. It began as curiosity, a gentle wondering that brushed against the heart of one watcher among many. He felt the first edge of a question forming, delicate and unfinished, like a chord reaching for a note that did not yet exist. Around him, the other angels continued their movement in patient rhythm, unaware that something ancient was beginning to shift. Even heaven, in all its brilliance, can tremble when a single heart begins to lean toward a dream beyond its borders. And though no sound broke the stillness, a kind of anticipation soon rippled through the unseen places, the way a sleeping world sometimes stirs before dawn. The Creator's throne radiated a light that shaped the heavens, a light older than time, a light without beginning. The angels gathered near it, not to worship in the way humans do, but simply to be warmed by what made them whole. They basked in that brightness, with the ease of children standing at the edge of a sunrise. But one among them found his gaze drifting away from the throne and toward the pale blue sphere forming far below, Earth. Young, fragile, raw with promise. He saw the oceans curling like newborn breaths, the mountains rising like the bones of dreams, the wind stretching its fingers across untouched plains. Something in him leaned closer, drawn by a tenderness he did not yet understand. As he watched the earth unfold, a quiet ache entered him, subtle as a thread of moonlight slipping beneath a door. He felt wonder, yes, but also something deeper, something heavier, a yearning to touch what he saw, to feel the roughness of soil, to hear the rush of wind, not as an observer, but as a participant. It was a desire he tried to ignore, but longing has a way of glowing brighter when pressed into darkness. He whispered his thoughts into the light, hoping they would fade, but they only grew clearer, sharper, more alive. In heaven, where all thoughts were shared, this new feeling began to hum through the fabric of existence, soft at first, then undeniable. A few angels turned their faces, sensing something unfamiliar moving through the harmony. Not rebellion, not yet, only the first shadow of it. The Creator saw the stirring, not with alarm but with deep understanding. For even longing has a place in the great story. Even the smallest whisper of desire can set in motion the rise and fall of worlds. But heaven had never known such a feeling. It did not know what to do with a heart that wanted more than perfection. It did not know how to hold an ache without breaking. The angels began to sense the shift, and though none spoke it aloud, their wings trembled with an emotion they had never felt before. Could harmony fracture? Could light bend? Could love wander? Down below, the earth continued its slow unfolding. Rivers brightened beneath the first Sunday. Shadows gathered beneath newborn trees. Glittering dust rose from the ground as if the planet were breathing for the very first time. And the watching angel felt something within him echo that breath. He felt closer to that world than to the boundless fire surrounding him. It called to him softly, like a forgotten memory rising from deep water. Something in its vulnerability awakened a tenderness he could not command, and in that moment, heaven felt its first tear forming not of grief, but of recognition. The story of the fall was not born of hatred, but of love reaching where it was forbidden to reach. Above it all, the sky of heaven shimmered with the faintest tremor, the smallest vibration of change. For the first time since creation, perfection felt fragile. For the first time, an angel wondered what it meant to choose. And in that wandering, heaven learned to weep not in sorrow, but in the quiet knowledge that something ancient was beginning, something that would touch every star, every spirit, every life yet to walk the earth. Something inevitable, beautiful, and tragic as the first night. The trembling inside heaven grew slowly, like a distant storm too far away to hear but close enough to feel in the bones of eternity. The angel who watched the earth, still unnamed in this story, still wrapped in innocence, found himself wandering the radiant halls with a new heaviness resting beneath his wings. He tried to lose himself in the music of the spheres, in the soft turning of constellations, in the warmth that flowed eternally from the Creator's throne. Yet everywhere he turned, the blue world below glimmered in the corner of his thoughts, calling to him with a quiet pulse. It was the pulse of rivers learning to run, of seeds learning to wake, of wind learning the shape of mountains. And he wondered if a being of spirit could ever understand such fragile beauty without touching it. Other angels began to notice his wandering gaze. Some felt curiosity tug at them, though they dared not follow its path. Others felt concern, like thin lines of shadow drawn across their bright spirits. Heaven did not know conflict, but it knew difference, and the difference growing inside him felt like the first ripple across a still pond. A few approached him gently, asking with voices like soft chimes what troubled his heart. But he could not answer, not because he refused, but because he did not yet know the language for longing. In heaven there were no words for wanting what was beyond your design. There were no words for edges or boundaries or forbidden closeness. There was only harmony, and harmony cannot imagine the taste of dissonance. One evening, if evening can exist in a realm without suns, the angel found himself standing at the edge of the celestial expanse, staring down into the swirling blues and golds of the young earth. Clouds drifted across the sky like slow-moving prayers, and he felt his breath catch, though angels do not breathe. He saw the first human tribes gathering near a fire they barely understood, their faces glowing with wonder as sparks rose like tiny stars. Their laughter rose faintly through the veil between worlds, and something inside him warmed, then broke open. He saw their fragility, he saw their innocence, and he saw their loneliness beneath the wide, unsettled sky. A whisper moved through him, softer than anything he had felt before. It was not a command, nor a temptation. It was something like compassion, but deeper, almost painful. He wanted to guard them. He wanted to guide them, not as a distant watcher, but as a presence close enough to feel the heat of their fire, close enough to hear their simple songs rising like trembling offerings toward the heavens. The desire startled him, for heaven was a place where desires were shared, not hidden. Yet he felt this one coil around his heart, like a secret flame. Far behind him, the Creator watched with ancient understanding. Nothing unfolded outside his sight, and yet he let the moment breathe. For love, even dangerous love, is part of the great design. Angels were given will not to break heaven, but to reveal its depths, and sometimes the most radiant truths emerge only when the first shadows are allowed to fall across the light. The angel's wings lowered as he leaned forward, drawn to the earth's glow. He sensed the heartbeat of creation pulsing through soil and sea, calling him to step beyond the laws that shaped him. But the veil between heaven and earth shimmered with invisible fire, a boundary placed not to punish, but to protect. Touching it would change him. Crossing it would change everything. Behind him, a presence appeared, another angel, gentle and bright, one who had long flown beside him in perfect harmony. Her voice was soft, like dawn brushing across still rivers. "Why do you linger here?" she asked. He hesitated, searching for words that did not exist in the language of light. Instead, he lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the world below. Her eyes followed his gesture, and for a moment she saw what he saw, the beauty, the fragility, the loneliness. For a moment her own heart stirred, but she stepped back, wings folding tightly. "We are watchers," she whispered, "not dwellers, not shapers. We were made to observe, not to join." Her voice wavered as she spoke, as though she feared the truth in her own reminder. The angel lowered his gaze, but the ache inside him did not fade. It grew, soft and steady, like a seed pushing through soil, seeking a sun it was never meant to reach. The other angel touched his shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort, but when she felt his sorrow, she withdrew her hand, as if it carried heat. She did not understand the longing within him. Not yet. But soon many would. As she departed, heaven fell into a silence deeper than before, a silence heavy with things unspoken. And in that silence, the watching angel finally whispered a word that no one in heaven had ever spoken. "Why?" It drifted across the celestial winds like the first crack in ancient glass, and heaven shivered. The question lingered in the air, long after it left his lips, trembling like a fragile thread caught between eternity and time. No angel had ever spoken such a word before, because no angel had ever needed to. Why belonged to longing. Why belongs to choice. Why belonged to beings who lived with uncertainty. And until that moment, heaven had known none of these. The word drifted outward, echoing against the luminous pillars that held the realm together, and though it made no sound, everything in creation felt it. The constellations dimmed for the briefest heartbeat. The golden rivers of light slowed, their motion stuttering as though caught in contemplation. Even the winds that carried divine melodies paused, unsettled by the unfamiliar note trembling at their core. The angel felt the shift and stepped back, startled by the weight his single word carried. It was as though he had touched the very foundation of heaven and found it softer than he imagined. Not weak, but tender, made of something that allowed for questions, even painful ones. He wondered in that moment if the Creator would speak, if a voice older than the stars would fill the silence and answer the ache inside him. But the heavens remained quiet, not in anger, but in patience. Heaven does not rush the heart. It lets longing find its shape. Slowly, the angel moved from the edge of the realm, his thoughts spiraling like drifting embers. Every step felt heavier, as though he carried a storm inside his chest. The other angels passed him with gentle nods, their faces still shaped by innocence. They felt the tremor in the air, but did not understand its source. A few glanced at him longer than usual, their eyes bright with distant concern, sensing the unease trailing behind him like a fading shadow. Yet none dared speak. Heaven was still unaccustomed to the idea that hearts could wander. The angel eventually settled near the choir of dawn, a place where music rose like gentle fire. It was here that angels gathered to shape the first light of creation each morning, weaving colors that would spill into the rising sun upon the earth. The songs were soft tonight, tender as warm breath against a winter window. But to the angel, even their beauty felt distant. As the melodies curled around him, he closed his eyes and let the harmonies pour over his spirit. He tried to lose himself in them, to drown the aching pull toward the earth below. Yet the music only made him feel the distance more deeply. For the first time, the perfection around him felt incomplete. He saw again the humans gathered by the fire, their tiny faces glowing in orange light, their voices rising in laughter that stumbled and soared like young wings. He saw the way they touched one another, not with divine radiance, but with hands warm from flame, hands that trembled from the cold. He imagined stepping into their circle, feeling the ground beneath his feet, taking in the smoke of their fire, letting the heat kiss his face. He imagined listening to their stories, stories shaped by fear and hope and hunger, stories that changed with every telling, stories that grew from need, not from knowledge. Could an angel understand them from so far away? Could he guard them without knowing the weight of their steps, the texture of their breath, the fragility of their lives? The more he asked, the more the longing deepened. It pressed against his ribs like a second heartbeat. It whispered to him that watching was not enough, that love was meant to draw near. Across the radiant hall, an elder angel watched him quietly. His wings were vast, shimmering with constellations older than recorded time. He had seen many things unfold across the ages, though none like this. With measured steps, he approached, sitting beside the troubled angel, without a word. For a long moment, they simply listened to the soft, rising harmonies around them. Finally, the elder spoke, his voice low and warm, like distant thunder wrapped in mercy. "You have looked upon the earth too deeply," he said. "Its beauty can stir desires in us that are not wrong, but not meant to be acted upon. You must guard your heart." The younger angel swallowed a silence heavy with struggle. "How can I guard something I do not understand?" he whispered. The elder exhaled, wings lowering in quiet sorrow. "By turning your gaze back to the one who formed it, longing grows where focus fades." But the words did not settle as they once would have. Instead, they fluttered uselessly, like leaves falling onto restless water. The young angel shook his head gently. "What if the longing itself was placed in me for a purpose? What if love is not a mistake?" The elder's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in grief. "Love is never a mistake," he murmured, "but what you do with it can alter worlds." A long stillness passed between them. The younger angel looked once more toward the earth. The elder followed his gaze, and for a heartbeat, both spirits felt the weight of what was coming. A story bigger than sorrow, bigger than longing, bigger than heaven itself. And somewhere deep within creation, a tear in the fabric of peace widened, silent, small, inevitable. The angel rose from the choir of dawn with wings heavy as gathering rain. His steps carried him through the shimmering arches of heaven, where rivers of living light flowed beneath crystalline paths. Everything around him sang of eternal harmony, yet inside him a quiet dissonance pulsed like a muted drum. He moved through crowds of radiant beings, spirits of fire, guardians of the firmament, heralds of dawn, but their gentle greetings drifted past him unheard. They smiled with the innocence of those who had never questioned their purpose, those who had never felt the pull of another world. He realized, with a trembling ache, that he no longer walked among them in spirit. A part of him was already elsewhere. He reached a high balcony, carved from the breath of stars, a place where angels often came to reflect. Below, the young earth turned slowly, glowing like a jewel wrapped in ribbons of cloud. Even from this height, he could sense the heartbeat of the world, its rawness, its wonder, its unsteady rhythm. Life was new there, fragile as a candle in the rising wind. Humans wandered through forests, that whispered ancient secrets, unaware that the eyes of heaven followed their every step. They stumbled, learned, forgot, tried again. Every failure carved them deeper. Every triumph lit them brighter. They were imperfect, but in their imperfection, they glowed with something heaven could not produce: becoming. He pressed his palms against the rail, feeling a shiver of longing move through him. "Why?" he breathed again. But this time the word did not echo. It fell softly, like a feather sinking into water. It was a question meant not for heaven, but for himself. Behind him, a presence stirred the still air. The elder angel had followed, though he approached with care, like one stepping into a room where someone already grieves. "You stand too close to the veil," he said gently. "The longer you look, the more earth will pull you." The younger angel didn't turn. His eyes remained fixed on the distant fires of early tribes dancing along the edges of night. "Do you not feel it too?" he whispered. "The way they reach upward, the way their hearts stretch for something just beyond them. It reminds me of us." The elder's wings shifted uneasily. "They reach for light because they were made to, but we were shaped from that same light. We are not meant to walk the same path." "But what if our paths are not as separate as we think?" the younger murmured. "What if love bridges what law divides?" A deep sorrow crossed the elder's face, for he remembered a time before the foundations of the world, when another angel, brilliant, proud, beloved, had spoken in similar tones. The elder felt a chill of memory. Longing, when untempered, could twist into ruin. Yet the young angel beside him was not driven by pride. He was driven by compassion, by tenderness, by the quiet pull of a heart discovering its own depth. "The one who made you knows your longing," the elder said softly. "But longing is not permission. The veil exists because earth cannot bear our full presence, and we cannot bear its fragility." The younger angel closed his eyes, letting the truth settle like falling ash. Yet the ache within him did not fade. It throbbed with growing clarity, shaping itself into something deeper than curiosity. "I do not wish to rule them," he said. "I only wish to be among them, to understand what they feel, to walk where they walk." The elder turned his gaze downward. "To walk where they walk means to leave where you stand. Heaven and earth do not flow together. Crossing the veil is a one-way river." The younger angel finally faced him, and in his eyes glowed a question even heaven could not soften. "Then what is the purpose of having a heart, if not to follow where it leads?" The elder inhaled sharply. For the first time, fear, gentle, sorrowful fear, entered his expression. "A heart is given to love rightly, not recklessly." "But love is reckless," the younger answered, voice trembling. "Look at them. Everything they do is reaching beyond themselves. Every breath is a risk. Every step is faith. How can I watch them? How can I guard them if I do not understand the warmth and weight of their world?" A tear, bright as liquid starlight, slid down the younger angel's cheek. In all of heaven's long existence, no angel had ever cried. The elder stepped forward, hands trembling, as if witnessing something sacred and terrifying. Tears were human things, mortal things, things shaped by longing and cost, things shaped by the possibility of loss. Heaven shuddered, for when the first angel shed the first tear, the realm felt something it had never felt before, the beginning of change. The elder looked at him with breaking tenderness. "If you follow this longing," he said, "you will reshape more than your own fate. You will awaken a story that cannot be undone." The younger angel wiped the tear from his cheek, staring down at it as though examining a fallen star. "Maybe," he whispered, "that story has already begun." And far below, on the young, trembling earth, a cold wind stirred, carrying with it the first faint echo of a war yet to come. The dawn of the young earth rose like a shy dream, its light soft and trembling across valleys untouched by memory. Mist curled between the trees like silver breath, and the first songs of early creatures drifted into the quiet morning. Everything was new, every leaf, every river, every movement of wind, exploring the world it had only just learned to touch. And high above this newborn landscape, the angels gathered along the shimmering edge of heaven, watching the earth with growing wonder. They had observed creation unfold day by day, but now, as the world settled into its rhythm, something deeper stirred within them. A quiet pull, a longing to draw closer, a desire to witness not from afar, but from within. It was a feeling that spread gently, like warm light moving through cold stone. Among them stood the angel, whose tear had changed the heavens. His heart beat with a rhythm not found in celestial realms, slow, tender, echoing the fragile pulse of the world below. Others felt his shifting presence, like wind moving through unseen spaces. They watched him not with judgment, but with curiosity, sensing that something ancient was unfolding through him, something that touched the edges of their own hearts. Some stepped nearer to the veil, peering into the mist-laced forests, drawn by the soft glow, rising from human campfires. They saw hands shaping tools from stone, voices singing beside streams, children chasing the shadows of early morning. The innocence of these beings born of dust and breath felt like a miracle unfolding in slow motion. Several angels whispered among themselves, their voices drifting like starlight through quiet air. "Look how they learn," one murmured. "Look how they love," said another. "Look how they reach toward us without knowing our names," whispered a third. Their admiration deepened, their affection growing like gentle vines curling around their hearts. They were watchers, guardians, meant to observe the unfolding of human history. But watching from a distance felt suddenly insufficient. The longing to know the humans, to guide them, to lift them, grew stronger with each rising Sunday. The Creator watched his children from the throne, eyes filled with patience older than the universe. He had set the angels as watchers, not to bind them, but to show them the beauty of freedom. Yet freedom always carries a cost, and the seeds of that cost were beginning to stir. Still, he allowed the moment to breathe, for love cannot be taught through restraint. It must unfold like dawn, soft and inevitable, revealing everything in its own time. Slowly, one angel stepped forward, his wings glowing with hesitant courage. He was not the first to feel longing, but he was the first to act upon it. He gazed at the earth with compassion, sensing the vulnerability of humankind, the cold nights, the unknown dangers, the fear of darkness that pressed against their small fires. He whispered a single thought: "I wish to help them." His words drifted through the celestial winds like delicate sparks. Soon, another angel stepped beside him, then another, and another. Their wings unfurled in shimmering unity, not out of rebellion, but out of love that had grown too heavy for stillness. The veil between heaven and earth flickered, shimmering like a curtain of living fire. Approaching it was forbidden not because heaven sought to control them, but because the touch of earth carried weight. To descend meant to enter time. To descend meant to feel the ache of mortality. To descend meant to risk forgetting the perfect harmonies of heaven. But longing pushed them closer, each step stirring heaven itself. The air around them thickened, trembling with a mixture of awe and foreboding. The angel, who had first tasted longing, stood slightly apart, heart torn between fear and desire. He knew that once the watchers descended, nothing would remain the same. Yet as he watched them inch toward the boundary, he felt the quiet truth rise within him. This was always the path. Love had opened the door. Curiosity had unlocked it. Compassion was now stepping through it. The veil pulsed once, twice, then softened. A wind rose from the earth, warm and fragrant, carrying the scent of cedar, river water, and distant fire. It brushed against the watchers' faces like a welcoming hand. And one by one, with wings lowered in reverence, the angels stepped through the veil and began their descent. Their fall was not a plunge, nor a rebellion. It was a surrender to wonder, a surrender to love, a surrender that would change the world. The descent was nothing like the angels expected. They had imagined stepping gently through the veil, imagined drifting like feathers toward the earth, imagined the transition to be almost effortless. But the moment they crossed that shimmering boundary, the world seized them with a force they had never known. Time, which they had only observed from afar, wrapped around them like a rushing river. Gravity, soft, invisible, patient, pulled at their forms, shaping them, grounding them, making their luminous bodies heavy with new substance. For the first time, the watchers felt the weight of a world that did not bend to their will. Their wings dimmed, their radiance softened, and their feet touched soil that pulsed with ancient life. They stood upon the earth, breathless though they did not need breath, stunned though they had never known surprise. The ground felt warm beneath their feet, vibrating with the hidden heartbeat of creation. Trees towered above them, their branches swaying like gentle guardians in the morning light. The sky stretched open and vast, not like heaven's endless expanse, but like a fragile canvas painted with shifting clouds. Everything was smaller here, yet everything felt heavier, more real, more intimate. The watchers looked at one another, wide-eyed in awe. The world pressed against their senses in ways heaven never had: sense of soil and water, sounds of distant streams, colors that shifted as the sun climbed higher. For a moment, they simply stood in silence, overwhelmed. And then, slowly, something inside them loosened. They smiled. They touched the earth with their fingers, letting dust cling to their hands. They listened to the song of insects hidden beneath leaves. They followed the shadows of birds drifting overhead. Wonder enveloped them, thick and warm. They were angels, yes, but in this world they felt almost like children newborn to sensation, newborn to movement, newborn to the tenderness of weight and warmth. Not far from where they stood, a human settlement lay nestled beside a river. Smoke curled from small fires. The voices of families rose on the morning wind, gentle chatter, laughter, the rustle of woven grass mats being lifted from the ground. The watchers froze, their hearts stirring in unison. Here were the ones who had pulled them from the sky. Here were the beings whose frailty had awakened longing in celestial hearts. A few of the angels took hesitant steps toward the village, their movements slow and reverent. They hid their radiant forms, dimming their glow, until they appeared almost as men, tall, luminous-eyed, otherworldly, but not overwhelming. They had no desire to frighten the humans. They came with gentleness, with curiosity, with the soft ache of compassion. As they drew closer, the humans felt a shift in the air. The wind grew still, the river's song quieted. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. A young girl was the first to see them. She stood barefoot on a stone, watching the morning unfold. Her eyes widened when the angels emerged from the trees, bathed in soft light. She did not scream. She did not run. Instead, she stepped forward, her curiosity greater than her fear. One of the watchers knelt before her, lowering his height so that their eyes met. He did not speak their languages, had not yet intertwined, but he offered her a small smile, warm and tender. The girl touched his shoulder with hesitant fingers, and he felt the warmth of human skin for the first time. It shocked him, so alive, so unguarded. His heart expanded painfully, filling with a love he had no words for. The humans gathered, forming a circle around the newcomers. They whispered in their ancient tongue, unsure whether to fall to their knees or reach out in wonder. The watchers stood among them like gentle giants, serene, luminous, filled with awe for the small and fragile beings staring up at them. It was a meeting written long before time began, a moment when heaven bent low enough for earth to feel its breath. Nightfall found the watchers still among the humans. They helped tend fires, though fire flickered strangely around their hands. They listened to stories told by trembling voices. They watched children play in dust that glowed faintly beneath their steps. And in the quiet of that first night, The angels realized a truth that would change the fate of the world. The distance between Watcher and Beloved was thinner than anyone had imagined, and once crossed, it could not be crossed back. The first night the Watchers spent on earth unfolded like a slow-burning dream, warm and trembling beneath a sky heavy with stars. The humans, though cautious, welcomed them with offerings of fruit and woven grass, placing them near the feet of the radiant visitors. The Watchers did not eat, but they accepted the gifts with gentle hands, honoring the fragile courage that urged the humans to reach out rather than run. The fire between them crackled softly, its glow painting gold across the faces of mortals and angels alike. Shadows danced on the ground, merging and separating as though hinting at a future where two worlds would intertwine in ways neither side could yet imagine. The Watchers sat among the humans in a circle that felt strangely sacred. For the first time, they felt the warmth of flame, not as celestial fire that obeyed divine command, but as earthly fire, alive and unpredictable. One angel reached toward it, letting the heat brush his fingers. He felt the sting, the presence of danger, the reminder that creation here had sharp edges, and instead of withdrawing, he smiled in wonder. Pain, he realized, was not a flaw. It was part of the world's heartbeat. It made every moment more fragile, more precious. Children watched the angels with wide, unblinking eyes. Some crawled closer, tracing the glowing patterns along the Watcher's skin. The angels allowed it, closing their eyes as small hands pressed against their arms, their faces, their hair. These touches awakened something deep within them, something warm, protective, ancient. It was as if the humans' innocence melted the last remaining distance left in their hearts. The angels had watched humanity from afar for ages, but they had never known their laughter, never felt their breath, never seen the flicker of fear and joy mingling in the same gaze. Now, sitting among them, the Watchers understood that watching alone could never satisfy the longing rising inside them. A young man approached one of the Watchers, offering a carved bowl filled with water. The angel received it carefully, lowering his head in gratitude. When he lifted the bowl to his lips, the cold water touched his mouth like a sudden memory, sharp, earthly, alive. It tasted of stone, sky, and wind. It tasted of impermanence. He felt the world imprint itself upon him, not with force, but with invitation. Something deep inside him whispered, "Stay." He closed his eyes and listened. As the night deepened, the Watchers began to notice something curious. Their sight, once boundless and eternal, now met the world in smaller, more intimate pieces. They could still sense the pulse of heaven, but it felt distant, softened, like a memory drifting behind a veil. Earth wrapped around them with a closeness that heaven never had. They could feel the coolness of the air, the softness of grass beneath their feet, the gentle thrum of insects hidden among roots. For the first time, they were not observers, they were participants. And participation carried weight. Above them, the stars shifted, and the moon drifted across the sky like a watchful eye. One of the angels looked up, sensing a faint sorrow trailing behind its light. Perhaps heaven was watching. Perhaps it already knew what these moments would become. Perhaps the price of this closeness was already unfolding. But the Watchers, lost in the tender gravity of earthly night, did not pull back. They leaned in. They helped humans stack stones for shelter, their hands steady and sure. They traced constellations in the dust to teach them the language of the sky. They listened to their fears, fear of storm, fear of hunger, fear of things unseen in the dark, and felt their hearts tighten with the urge to protect. And as the humans slept beside them, curled into the warmth of their fires, a quiet vow formed in the hearts of the Watchers. They would guard these fragile beings. They would guide them, gently and faithfully. They would stand between them and whatever shadows moved in the wild places beyond the firelight. But beneath that vow, another feeling stirred, something softer, something deeper, something dangerous. It was not yet love. but it was close enough to lead them there. The night faded slowly, as if reluctant to surrender the quiet intimacy it had woven between angels and humankind. A pale blush touched the horizon, and dawn crept softly over the land, brushing mountains with gold and coaxing birds from their hiding places. The humans stirred gradually, stretching sleepy limbs, whispering morning prayers to the rising Sunday. But the watchers did not sleep. They had sat awake through the long hours, listening to the rhythm of breathing around them, guarding the fragile peace of the camp with eyes that saw far beyond the boundaries of darkness. Yet something in them had changed. The stillness inside them, once perfect, unbroken, now felt alive with a new pulse, a new awareness they could neither define nor deny. As the first light warmed the earth, one of the watchers rose to his feet. He walked slowly to the river, its surface glistening like liquid sky. When he knelt and dipped his fingers into the water, the coolness sent a tremor through him. Ripples expanded outward, catching the morning light. He stared at his reflection and saw something unfamiliar, staring back. His face was still noble, still radiant, but softer now, shaped by the touch of earth, touched by things that heaven had never offered. A subtle shadow of humanity rested beneath his eyes, as though the world had already claimed a piece of him. He felt both wonder and fear, intertwined like roots beneath the soil. Behind him, another angel joined, gazing at the water with silent awe. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. The first angel nodded. "Yes, the world breathes through us now, and heaven feels farther." The second angel spoke the truth with a sorrow he did not attempt to hide. A breeze drifted across the river, lifting strands of grass and stirring leaves. The angels stood in its path, letting it wash over them. Earth's breath, Earth's scent, Earth's voice. It was different from the winds of heaven, heavier, imperfect, filled with warmth and dust. And yet, it felt comforting. Footsteps approached behind them. A small boy, no more than 5 summers old, wandered toward the riverbank, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw the angels, he did not startle. Instead, he walked between them, taking each by the hand. The angels froze, overwhelmed by the innocence of the gesture. The boy tugged them closer to the water, and without speaking, he knelt and splashed his face, droplets scattered like tiny stars. He looked up at them and laughed, a sound so pure it pierced the last untouched part of their hearts. The first angel knelt beside him. Slowly, almost reverently, he cupped water in his hands and brought it to the boy, letting it cascade in a glittering stream. The child giggled, placing his tiny palm over the angel's much larger one. That simple touch, warm and fragile, shattered any lingering boundaries the watcher had hoped to preserve. The humans began to gather along the river, drawn by the morning light and their strange new visitors. The watchers found themselves surrounded women with woven baskets, men preparing tools, children tugging at their hands with fearless curiosity. The angels offered small guidance where they could, showing how to shape stones more sharply, how to read the patterns of migrating birds, and how to follow the hidden paths of rivers that led to fertile ground. These lessons were simple, gentle gestures, not revelations, but they brought smiles to human faces, and the watchers felt pride blooming inside them like early flowers after winter thaw. But as the sun climbed higher, the angels began to sense the first, faint warning. Their strength, once boundless, felt tethered now, as though the world's gravity had wrapped soft ropes around them. They moved with grace, but not the unbroken ease of heaven. They could feel the limits of form, the weight of being shaped by matter. And though this vulnerability drew them nearer to humanity, it also whispered a quiet truth. They were becoming something between worlds, not fully angel, not fully human, caught in a threshold that had no name. The humans did not notice this shift. They only saw protectors, teachers, beings of light who had stepped into their world with kindness and mystery. But the watchers felt it deeply. Their hearts beat with unfamiliar rhythms. Their thoughts drifted into places they had not meant to go. And toward the edge of the village, one angel watched a young woman collecting wild grain, her hair catching the sun, her laughter rising like soft bells, and he felt a tremor of longing so powerful he had to look away. The lines had begun to blur. The walls between heaven and earth had begun to crumble. The Watchers had descended, and the world would never return to what it once was. The dawn of humanity had been touched by the dawn of angels, and in this soft, glowing hour, a forbidden future woke quietly beneath their feet. The world did not change all at once. It shifted slowly, like sand moving beneath unseen tides. Weeks passed after the Watchers descended, weeks in which heaven's quiet order blended with the warm breath of earth. The humans grew accustomed to the radiant beings who walked among them, and the Watchers grew accustomed to the rhythm of human life, the sound of grinding grain, the hiss of burning wood, the unsteady laughter that rose from evening fires. Yet beneath this gentle harmony, something new had begun to stir. It moved deep within the wombs of mortal women, quiet as moonlight, patient as roots beneath soil. The first signs were subtle, strange strength in unborn children, strange dreams in their mothers, strange warmth lingering in the air whenever the angels drew near. It was as if a new thread had slipped into the tapestry of creation, woven from two worlds that were never meant to touch. One morning, long before dawn, a woman woke beneath the shelter of her thatched roof, with a trembling hand pressed to her stomach. A heat radiated from within her, not sickness, not fever, but something alive and growing with impossible force. She had felt movement earlier than any mother should, felt kicks like the pulse of storm winds against her ribs. She whispered to her husband with fear in her eyes. He comforted her, but when he touched her belly, the child responded with a strength that made his breath catch. They told no one at first. They believed it was only their imagination. They believed the presence of the angels had blessed their unborn child. But as days passed, the truth grew harder to ignore. The Watchers sensed it, not clearly, not immediately, but in soft ripples that brushed against their spirits. They felt the world tilt beneath their feet when the pregnant women passed. They felt the faint tremor of something more than human, something ancient, something monumental unfolding in secret. Some of the angels tried to push the unease away. Others watched carefully, torn between fear and awe. A few felt pride in what their closeness had created, and one felt dread settle inside him like a stone sinking through deep water. As the first child approached its time, the entire village felt a strange pressure in the air. The wind fell silent. Birds hid in the branches. Even the river flowed with a slower, heavier rhythm, as though bracing for something immense. The mother labored with cries that echoed across the valley, raw and fierce. Women gathered around her, whispering prayers, but the Watchers who could command storms and shape light found themselves helpless in the presence of this earthly pain. They stood outside the hut, their hands pressed together, hearts trembling with emotions they had no names for. Fear, hope, responsibility, regret. When the child finally entered the world, the midwives froze. None of them moved. None of them breathed. The infant lay in their arms, silent and still, not because it was weak, but because it was listening. Its eyes opened slowly, revealing a depth no newborn should possess. Golden light shimmered faintly within its pupils, like embers glowing beneath ash, and when it finally cried, the sound was not the fragile wail of a human child. It was low, resonant, shaking the thatched walls and the hearts of all who heard it. The father stumbled backward. The mother wept, not out of fear, but out of a strange, overwhelming love for the powerful, beautiful creature she held. The Watchers exchanged glances, their faces pale with realization. Something irreversible had happened, something forbidden, something that would shape the world with hands too large for its fragile bones. As the days passed, the child grew faster than any human. By the time he reached 1 year, He stood as tall as a boy of 5. His strength was frightening. He could lift stones that grown men struggled to move. His laughter shook branches. His footsteps left impressions on the earth. Yet his eyes, those shimmering, ancient eyes, carried a sadness no child should know, as if he understood he did not fully belong to the world he was born into. He was the first Nephilim, the first giant born of heaven's longing and earth's innocence, a child of 2 realms blessed, burdened, and destined to reshape creation. And he would not remain the last. The seasons turned gently, but the giants grew with startling speed, rising like young mountains beneath the open sky. The first child, named Arak by his mother, soon towered above the men of the village, his shoulders broad as river stones, his steps shaking dust from the nearby cliffs. Yet for all his strength, he remained tender. He followed his mother like a shadow, carried water as gently as a whispered prayer, and sat by the fires each night with his enormous hands folded in his lap, listening to the stories the elders told. The villagers feared him at first, but fear slowly softened into wonder. They watched him try to mimic human gestures, tilting his head in curiosity, kneeling to avoid frightening children, lowering his voice to a rumble that made the ground hum. He tried, with all his heart, to belong. But the world around him did not understand how to hold a being like Arak. When he walked through fields, seedlings bowed beneath his weight. When he hunted in forests, the trees trembled at his passing. Even the animals sensed the strange duality within him. Half of heaven, half of earth. Something too vast for the natural order to bear without strain. And though he smiled often, though he carried an innocence as large as his frame, the sadness in his eyes deepened with each passing season. He longed to be small enough to fit into the world that had given him life. The watchers watched him closely. They observed the way he grew, the way he breathed, the way the air trembled around him when his emotions swelled too strongly. Arak was not only strong, he was becoming something new, something unknown, something shaped by heaven's fire and earth's clay in equal measure. And the more he became, the more the angels felt the tremor of destiny shifting beneath their feet. But Arak was only the beginning. Soon, other women found themselves carrying children who kicked with unnatural force, who glowed faintly beneath their skin when they slept. Their cravings were strange, their dreams vivid and wild. The watchers knew then that the boundary they had crossed had not simply touched the world, it had rewritten it. One by one, more children were born, sons with thunder in their bones, daughters with voices that held the calm power of distant storms, infants whose first breaths stirred the wind. The giants, the Nephilim, spread across the valleys like gilded shadows. They ran along riverbanks with strides that swallowed the earth. They lifted logs heavier than 10 men. They learned faster than any human child, absorbing every lesson with frightening ease. Villagers marveled at them, feared them, worshipped them. Some believed these children were gifts from the heavens. Others whispered that they were warnings. And though the watchers tried to guide them, the giants grew beyond their reach. Their hearts carried a depth the angels could not fully predict. They knew love with a purity that shook the ground. They knew anger with a force that broke the sky. Their emotions were the tides of a new world rising beautiful, powerful, and dangerously uncharted. One evening, as the last light of day melted into the mountains, Arak wandered alone to the cliff's edge overlooking the valley. The watcher who had fathered him approached quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and sorrow braided tightly together. The giant did not turn. He stared at the horizon, watching the fading sun, with eyes that glowed faintly like smoldering embers. "Why am I so different?" he asked, his voice low and trembling. "Why does the earth whisper beneath my feet? Why do the birds flee when I draw near?" The watcher's heart tightened. He had no simple answer, only a truth heavy with regret. "You are the result of 2 worlds meeting," he said softly. "A bridge woven from heaven's light and earthly breath. You are more than we imagined, more than we were meant to shape. Arak closed his eyes, and a single tear fell, a tear that struck the ground like a small stone. I do not want to frighten them, he whispered. I want to belong. You belong, the angel murmured, though a quiet fear gnawed at the edge of his certainty. The sun dipped behind the mountains, bleeding gold into shadow. Arak's silhouette stood tall and solemn against the twilight, a being too large for the world that held him, too gentle for the strength he bore, too ancient for the childhood he longed to keep. He was a giant, he was a wonder, he was a warning, and in the growing darkness, the shadows he cast stretched farther than either of them realized. As Arak grew, so did the others, children born across scattered valleys, across hidden tribes, across distant plains, touched by the presence of the Watchers. The world, once quiet and slow, began to tremble with the footsteps of beings who stretched toward the sky. Their laughter rolled like distant thunder. Their tempers, when stirred, broke branches and split stones. Yet their hearts remained painfully tender, too large, too exposed, too unshielded for the fragile villages that tried to raise them. In the early days, humans loved their giant children. They marveled at their strength, at their beauty, at the strange glow that flickered beneath their skin. Villages built bigger shelters. Fields were cleared to make room for larger steps. Rivers became gathering places where giants washed their hands in water that shimmered around them like liquid light. For a time, it felt as though the world could hold them, as though harmony between heaven's descendants and earth's children might truly endure. But the giants grew faster than the world could adapt. By the time they reached the age of 7, many stood taller than the highest huts. Their hands were capable of crushing fruit into juice with the slightest squeeze. Their leaps shook loose dust from cliff faces, and their hunger, an ache that rose from some deep, ancient part of them, began to surpass what fields and forests could provide. With this hunger came restlessness. Giants wandered farther from home, seeking the boundaries of the world they were meant to call theirs. They chased storms across hills, reaching toward lightning that danced just beyond their grasp. They ran beside wild beasts, not out of fear, but out of longing for companionship equal in strength. They shouted across valleys, their voices echoing for miles. And slowly, the humans began to fear the very children they once held in their arms. One night, after a long day of wandering, Arak returned to the village with leaves tangled in his hair and a weariness in his eyes. He sat beside his mother's fire, but even sitting, he towered above her. She placed her hand on his forearm, needing both hands to span the width of it. "You walked too far today," she said gently. "I could feel the ground shake until nightfall." Arak tried to smile, but the weight inside him pressed too heavily. "I did not mean to," he whispered. "I forget how large I am. I forget until I see fear in their faces." She stood and touched his cheek, her hand barely covering a fraction of it. "You are my son," she said, voice trembling. "Not a burden, not a threat. You are a wonder." But her words, though full of love, could not mend the growing distance between Arak and the world around him. He saw the way men stepped aside whenever he approached. He heard mothers hush their children when his shadow fell across them. And though no one said it aloud, he felt the truth. The world was too small for him. The Watchers sensed this growing fracture. They saw the giants struggle with belonging, saw them wrestle with their strength like lions wrestling with their own tails. Some giants grew gentle, bending low to avoid trees, whispering when they spoke, walking on softened feet to avoid shaking the earth. But others, especially those born in distant valleys, raised with less guidance, less love, began to embrace their power with reckless abandon. They lifted boulders for sport. They uprooted trees in moments of frustration. A few began to fight among themselves, their clashes shaking the hills with echoes like rolling thunder. One evening, a watcher named Sariel found Arak sitting by the river, legs submerged in water, that rippled violently with every shift of his weight. Stars glittered on the surface, broken by his reflection, a face too old for a child, too young for the sorrow it carried. Sariel approached quietly, stepping over fallen branches Arak had unknowingly snapped earlier that day. "You are troubled," the angel said softly. Arak did not look up. "The world bends beneath me," he murmured. "I try to be gentle, but even my gentleness breaks things." Sariel sat beside him. "Strength is not a curse," he said. "It feels like one," Arak whispered. Sariel's gaze softened. "Your birth was never meant to be your burden." Arak finally met his eyes, and in that look, heavy, ancient, wounded, the angel saw the truth. Giants were not monsters. They were children caught between destinies, carrying a power too vast for their tender spirits. The river continued to murmur beside them, unaware of the fragile moment unfolding on its banks. And somewhere in the distance, beyond mountains, beyond forests, another giant's roar shook the night. It was the first true warning. The world was beginning to break beneath their shadows. The roar that echoed through the night spread far beyond the valley. It rippled through forests, unsettling flocks of resting birds. It vibrated across distant plains, stirring animals from their sleep. And in the hearts of humans, huddled in their modest shelters, it awakened a fear they had never known. Arak heard it from the riverbank, deep, jagged, heavy with rage, and his breath caught. Sariel rose to his feet at once, wings glowing faintly with alarm. That sound did not belong to a child of gentle spirit. It belonged to a giant who had discovered anger. Sariel placed a hand on Arak's shoulder. "Stay here," he said quietly. But Arak stood too, towering above the angel, his face reflecting both fear and a strange sense of responsibility. "No," he whispered. "He sounds lost." And without waiting for permission, Arak moved into the trees, each step sending tremors through the soil. Sariel followed, torn between caution and a growing realization. The giants were beginning to shape their own destiny, one that neither angel nor human fully understood. They found the source of the roar in a clearing where moonlight fell in pale ribbons through jagged branches. There, a young giant named Madir, only 12 seasons old but already massive, knelt beside the broken trunk of a tree he had uprooted with one furious pull. His chest heaved, his fists were clenched, the earth beneath him cracked in a spiderweb of fractures. A group of villagers stood at the edge of the clearing, frozen, their torches trembling in their hands. Arak approached slowly, lowering himself to the ground so he would not stand above Madir. "Brother," he said softly, "what happened?" Madir shook his head, breath ragged. "I didn't mean to break it," he said. "The tree was old. I only leaned on it and it snapped." They screamed. He pointed toward the villagers with trembling fingers. "I only wanted to help them gather wood, but they look at me like I am a beast." Arak's heart tightened. He knew that look. He had seen it in eyes that once held warmth. "You are not a beast," he murmured. "But the world thinks I am," Madir whispered. Tears, bright as molten gold in the moonlight, slid down his cheeks. "And sometimes, I feel like I am too big to argue with it." The villagers took a step back. One of them dropped a torch, sparks scattering across the ground. Fear carved their shadows into trembling shapes. The distance between giant and human widened with every heartbeat. Sariel stepped forward, his voice calm and low. "None of this is your fault, Madir. The world is changing, and none of us know how to keep up with it. But anger will not help you belong. Let us walk with you. Let us teach you to carry your strength." Madir's hands loosened, but the sorrow in his face remained deep. "Will it ever stop?" he asked. "Will the earth ever feel safe beneath my feet?" Arak swallowed, unable to lie. "I hope so," he whispered, "but I don't know." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the wind dared not move. At last, Sariel guided the villagers away, calming their fears with gentle words. Arak stayed with Mandir until his sobs quieted, until the trembling in his massive frame faded into stillness. They walked together toward the village, two giants moving like hesitant shadows between trees too narrow to hold them. But the world was no longer the world of their birth. Word spread quickly across lakes, across hills, across wandering tribes. Stories of giants grew with each telling. Some described their kindness, most described their power. A few whispered of their fury. Fear bent these stories, shaping them into warnings. And humans, fragile and uncertain, began to build deeper hesitations into their hearts. As the months passed, the giants and humans grew apart, not through hatred, but through misunderstanding. The giants wanted belonging, the humans wanted safety, and between these desires grew a chasm wide enough to swallow trust. One evening, Arak returned to his mother's hut and found her sitting in the doorway, hands folded tightly. She looked up at him with eyes that shimmered in the firelight, eyes filled with love, but also something else, something deeper, something heavier. "Arak," she said quietly, "some of the men, they are afraid. They speak of asking the angels to take you away." A cold, hollow ache opened inside him. "Take me away," he whispered. "But this is my home." "I know," she said, her voice breaking, "but fear does not listen to truth." Arak stepped back, shoulders trembling. The hut, small and warm and filled with every memory of his childhood, suddenly felt too fragile to hold him. He lifted his gaze to the night sky, searching for comfort in the stars. But tonight, even the stars seemed distant. A giant's shadow had begun to stretch across the world, and the world was beginning to decide whether it could bear such shadows at all. Dawn rose slowly over the changing world, its light stretching across valleys where human footsteps once moved softly and alone. Now, a new rhythm echoed through the land, a rhythm shaped by the presence of giants and the lingering touch of angels. The world was no longer a quiet cradle for fragile tribes. It had begun to thrum with the energy of possibility, danger, and transformation. Yet in the midst of this shifting landscape, something extraordinary was taking form. Humans, guided by the Watchers and inspired by a single idea, whispered one night beside a glowing fire. A man sat with his family, studying the stars the angels had taught them to read. "What if," he murmured, "we built a place as strong as the giants, a place that could hold us when the storms return?" His words drifted upward like smoke, reaching ears not meant to hear them. The angels, perched silently in the branches above, exchanged glances tinged with both wonder and uncertainty. Humans were evolving fast, faster than heaven had anticipated. Knowledge, once passed gently in small lessons, how to shape stone, how to read the wind, how to track the seasons, was igniting something deeper inside them, something like ambition, something like destiny. Over the next moons, more whispers rose. Plans sketched into dust, symbols traced in the air by angelic hands, copied by trembling human fingers. Soon, a shape began to form, a place unlike anything the world had ever seen. A city, not of stone alone, not of wood alone, but of intention. A place where giants could walk without crushing homes. A place where humans could gather without fear. A place where angels could descend and not dim their radiance for the sake of those below. The first site chosen lay in a vast clearing where the river curved like an open arm around the earth. The land hummed softly beneath their feet, as though welcoming the vision rising within the hearts of humankind. The Watchers hesitated at first. They knew what creation meant. They knew how easily pride could weave itself into stone walls and towering structures. Creation has always belonged to the divine. But humans, sparked by angelic influence, had begun to touch the edges of that divine fire. In the quiet hours of dawn, the angels finally stepped forward to guide them. They taught the people how to shape stones with sharper tools, how to lift beams with pulleys crafted from ropes and carved wheels, how to measure space through the shadows cast at midday. And though the angels meant only to assist, not to rule, their guidance became the heartbeat of something magnificent. Children watched as structures rose from the earth, their eyes widening at walls taller than any they had seen. Elders traced their fingers along the smooth edges of cut stone, whispering prayers of gratitude and awe. Arak, the firstborn giant, visited the site often. For the first time in many moons, he felt a sense of belonging stirring faintly in his immense chest. Here the walls did not crumble beneath his touch. Here the paths were wide enough to hold his steps. Here the people did not scatter when his shadow fell across them. They waved him closer, asking him to lift beams too heavy for human hands. His heart swelled with quiet joy. Perhaps this, he thought, was the answer to his longing. A place where he was not too large, not too strange, not too dangerous. But beneath that hope, the angels sensed a deeper ripple. The city rose quickly, too quickly. Humans learned with frightening speed, absorbing knowledge meant to unfold over centuries. And with knowledge came confidence. With confidence came ambition. With ambition came the faintest shimmer of pride. The angels watched the city walls climb higher and higher, their shadows stretching longer each evening. A shimmering beauty, yes. A place of refuge, yes. But also a place where the boundaries between heaven and earth grew thinner with every stone placed. One angel whispered to another, "We have given them too much." The other replied, "Or perhaps they were always capable of more than we believed." As the sun dipped behind the hills, the first city of humankind glowed with firelight, its walls casting golden reflections upon the river. It was a wonder, a promise, a beginning. But beginnings, in the old stories, always carry seeds of what they will one day become glory or ruin. And somewhere deep within the new-built corridors, a shadow moved, unnoticed, a whisper of what was yet to unfold. The city continued to grow, stretching outward like a living being discovering its limbs. Each dawn brought new shapes rising from the earth, pillars carved with swirling patterns, stones fitted with uncanny precision, courtyards wide enough for giants to rest beneath the shade of woven canopies. Humans marveled at their own creation, walking through the archways with hands trailing along the smooth surfaces as if touching a dream. To them, this city was more than shelter. It was a promise, a declaration that humanity was no longer drifting through the wilderness, but rooting itself into the world with intention and hope. The watchers moved among them like quiet guides, offering knowledge as gently as a mother offers bread to a child. They taught humans how to fire clay into pottery, how to mix earth with straw to create bricks strong enough to withstand powerful rains, and how to carve channels to direct water through the fields. Every new lesson felt like a miracle. But miracles, when given too freely, can lose their reverence. Some humans began to crave more. They wanted secrets, not just skills. They wanted to shape metal, to bend fire, to call lightning by name. They asked the angels questions that pierced the quiet peace of the early days. How do you command the stars? How do you move without sound? How do you heal with only a touch? At first, the angels smiled and shook their heads, gently refusing. But humans, once awakened to the taste of wisdom, could not easily quiet their hunger. Arak sensed this new tension. He felt it in the way some men argued over where the city wall should rise next, in the way certain craftsmen boasted about the techniques they had learned from the angels, claiming the knowledge as their own invention. He saw envy flickering in the eyes of those who lacked the giant's strength. He heard whispers in the marketplace, quiet, fearful whispers that perhaps the giants had been created not as helpers, but as warnings of what might happen if humanity reached too high. Still, Arak worked tirelessly to ease the burden where he could. He lifted heavy stones onto platforms, held beams steady as people secured them with ropes, cleared pathways blocked by boulders after storm winds. Children followed him, laughing as he carried them on his shoulders, their tiny hands clutching his hair like fragile vines. In those moments he felt whole, yet even then, a strange unease lingered beneath his joy, like a shadow trailing behind him, no matter the light. One afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled across the city's outer walls, a group of watchers gathered in a quiet grove just beyond the construction site. Their faces were troubled, their wings dimmed with thought. Sariel stood at the center, his expression carved with concern. "We have given them too much," one angel said, folding his arms. "They build with our knowledge, they dream with our guidance, and soon they will desire what is not meant for them." Another shook her head. "They desire because we showed them possibilities. It is not their fault alone." Sariel's voice broke the tension, low and resonant. "The greater issue is not the humans. It is what our closeness has birthed." His gaze turned toward the city, where Arak was laughing beside a group of children. "The Nephilim are growing faster than we imagined. Their strength could reshape the world, or shatter it." The angels fell silent, for even they, with all their wisdom, could not foresee what giants born of heaven's longing and earth's breath might become. Night approached, draping the city in blue shadow. Fires flickered along the streets, illuminating the bustling life within. Families gathered at their doorways. Giants reclined near the outer walls, sharing stories with children who wandered too close to sleep. The watchers perched atop the rooftops, their luminous eyes reflecting the glow of the fires. They watched humanity's first city, breathing with life and ambition. And deep within the city's heart, beneath layers of stone and dust, something stirred a quiet vibration, as if the earth itself sensed the weight of destiny settling upon this place. Here, the balance of creation was shifting. Here, paths were being laid that would lead either to brilliance or downfall. Arak felt the tremor beneath his feet, but did not understand it. He only felt a pang of uneasiness ripple up his spine. For the first time since his childhood, the world no longer felt entirely safe beneath him, and overhead, the night sky shimmered not with peace, but with waiting. The days that followed carried a strange mixture of harmony and unrest, woven together like threads pulled from different destinies. The city shone brilliantly beneath the sun, its walls glimmering with fresh plaster, its courtyards alive with laughter, its markets bustling with newly learned skills. Yet beneath the surface, something unseen began to thicken in the air. It was not darkness, not yet. It was more like a quiet tension rising slowly, like sap pushing upward inside a tree before a storm. Arak felt it most vividly. When he walked through the city, children still ran to him, their faces bright with trust. He lifted them onto his shoulders, played with them in the wide fields outside the walls, and carried water jars for families who struggled with the weight. But he also noticed how adults watched him. When they thought he wasn't looking, their smiles were tighter, their voices lower, their steps cautious. It wasn't hatred, it was fear pretending to be caution, caution pretending to be politeness, and it stung. One evening, as Arak walked toward the river to wash the dust from his skin, he overheard two men speaking behind a half-finished wall. Their voices were hushed, trembling. "We trust them now," one murmured. "But what happens when they grow tired of us? What happens when they want more than what we can give?" "They could crush us," the other whispered. "Even the gentle ones. Too much strength is dangerous." Arak stopped breathing. Their words sank into him like cold stones falling through deep water. He stepped back quietly, not wanting them to know he'd heard. He didn't blame them. They were small. He was not. But their fear settled inside him, heavy as winter frost, and he could not shake it off. That night, under a pale moon, Arak sat on the city wall, with his enormous hands resting on his knees. The stone beneath him groaned under his weight, a reminder that even the structures built to welcome him strained to hold what he had become. Sariel appeared beside him, stepping from the shadows like a soft breath of wind. "You heard them," the angel said gently. Arak did not answer. He only stared at his hands. Sariel continued, "Humans fear what they cannot control. They fear storms. They fear the dark. They fear their own mistakes. And they fear you because you carry power that does not fit into their understanding." Arak's voice cracked. "I never wanted to be feared." "I know," Sariel replied, "but fear does not ask what you want." A long silence hung between them, broken only by the distant sound of night insects humming through fields beyond the city. At last, Arak whispered, "Why did you make us like this? Why give us strength that hurts the world we love?" Sariel's wings drooped slightly. "We didn't understand the full consequences of our choices. We saw beauty in humanity and wanted to draw closer. We did not foresee how closeness would alter the shape of creation." Arak looked at him, eyes shimmering with sadness. "And now we must protect you," Sariel said, "and protect the humans from their own fear." But even as he said this, doubt flickered across the angel's face. For how does one protect two worlds drifting apart? How does one hold together what was never meant to merge? As days turned to weeks, the city grew more magnificent. Towers rose tall enough to catch the morning light like spears of bronze. Gardens bloomed in geometric patterns. Water channels carved through the ground, bringing life to fields far beyond the city walls. People began to speak proudly of their home, saying, "This is our shelter, our strength, our gift." But ambition is a quiet architect. It builds towers not only of stone, but of desire. Some men began to climb the towers at night, staring at the stars with longing. Some women whispered to the watchers, asking for knowledge that even heaven kept in silence. Some craftsmen studied the giants, trying to shape tools that mimicked their strength. And slowly, gently, the city's glow shifted. What had begun as hope now carried the faintest shimmer of hunger. One evening, as the sky turned amber, Arak stood at the highest platform of the tallest tower. From there, he could see the world stretch endlessly, rivers glinting like threads of silver, forests swaying like dark sea waves, distant villages flickering like sparks in the dusk. His heart swelled with love for all of it. And yet, a tremor of foreboding settled in his bones. The world was growing. The city was rising. Humans were learning too much, too fast. And the giants' children born from that fragile union were becoming shadows cast by a light too bright to bear. Arak closed his eyes, feeling the tower shift beneath his weight. High above the world, he whispered a question into the wind, "Where is this path leading?" But the wind carried no answer, only silence. And silence, in ancient stories, often means the answer is too heavy to speak. Night settled over the valley like a dark, shimmering veil. The city, alive with flickering firelight, looked almost like a constellation fallen from the heavens, clusters of homes glowing softly, towering structures rising like quiet mountains of stone. Yet within this beauty, the watchers felt an unease stirring. It pressed against their wings like a cold wind, urging them to listen, to watch more closely, to see what lay beneath the surface of human ambition. Sariel walked the quiet streets, his feet gliding across stone that still held the faint warmth of the day's Sunday. He paused near the central courtyard, where humans gathered each evening to trade stories and goods. But tonight, something different unfolded. A circle of men and women huddled around a giant torch, their voices hushed, but edged with an excitement that made the air tremble. "We must build higher," one man declared, lifting a carved stone to catch the fire's glow. "We must rise toward the sky. If the angels came down to us, surely we can rise closer to them." Another nodded eagerly. "Why should heaven be so far away? We have the knowledge. We have giants to lift the stones. We can reach a place where only the divine once stood." Sariel's breath stilled. These were not the soft, humble hopes of early humankind. These were seeds of a desire he knew too well. a desire that once shattered the peace of heaven itself. He stepped back into the shadows, unseen, watching, listening. The humans' voices rose and fell like the murmurs of a growing storm. From across the courtyard, Arak approached. Even among the gathered crowd, his presence commanded attention. His steps were heavy, yet careful, as if he feared breaking the ground beneath him. When he stood at the courtyard's edge, the voices dimmed. He gazed at the fire, its reflection trembling in his deep, ember-like eyes. "What are you planning?" Arak asked, his voice soft but powerful enough to carry across the clearing. The man who had spoken first straightened nervously. "We only wish to build something great, something worthy of our new world." Arak lowered himself to one knee so he wouldn't tower over them so immensely. "Greatness is not measured in height," he murmured. "A tall tower cannot hold the weight of a prideful heart." The man hesitated before replying. "And how do you know what belongs in our hearts? You are not a man. You are something else." Arak flinched, not visibly, but inwardly, like a deep wound reopening. The crowd sensed the shift and grew uneasy. A child beside the fire began to cry softly, frightened by the tension he didn't understand. From the rooftop above, Serial watched with sorrow. Every passing day seemed to widen the invisible lines between the giants and the people, between the angels and the world they had touched. What had begun as harmony was straining under the weight of growing ambition and growing fear. Arak rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the courtyard like a dark mirror of the towering walls behind him. "I do not wish to control you," he said quietly, "but I ask you to be careful. Some paths do not lead upward, they only appear to." The people said nothing. Some nodded, some looked away, some whispered beneath their breath, but none truly heard him, not in the way he hoped. Later, Arak walked alone atop the city wall, letting the night wind cool the heat in his chest. He looked over the land, the forests, the rivers, the glowing clusters of homes, and felt torn between two worlds, too large for one, too bound to the other. Below, in the city's depths, 3 men gathered in secret beside a carved stone slab, tracing symbols into its surface, symbols the angels never meant to teach. Their voices trembled with devotion and desire. "Soon," one whispered, "we will rise high enough to see where even the stars bow." The slab hummed softly beneath their hands, a sound like something awakening. Far from the city, in hidden valleys where other giants dwelled, similar whispers began to rise. Whispers of identity, whispers of power, whispers of futures not meant for mortal or heavenly hands. And overhead, the moon dimmed for a heartbeat, as though turning its face in quiet warning. The city of first people had become a beacon, a place of beauty, yes, but also a place where pride, longing, and divine influence mingled in dangerous harmony. A place where destiny was being rewritten, stone by stone, dream by dream, whisper by whisper. And though no one yet saw it clearly, the shadow of this city would one day stretch farther than any wall they built, far enough to touch the floodwaters that waited in the womb of time. The world had changed so gradually that most humans didn't sense the moment the shift became irreversible, like a tree that grows for years before anyone realizes its roots have cracked the stone beneath it. But the Watchers knew. They felt it in the trembling of the air, in the stirring of the soil, in the restless rhythm of their own hearts. The boundary between heaven and earth, once bright and firm as a blade of light, had begun to blur. What had started as a soft touch, a gentle descent, now pulsed with consequences growing heavy beneath the surface of creation. The giants were no longer children learning their place in the world. They had become forces, walking storms, shaped from human tenderness and angelic fire. Some still carried innocence in their steps, watching over fields, guarding sleeping tribes, lifting stones with careful hands. But others, raised far from guidance, felt the world bending beneath their strength and mistook that bending for purpose. They pushed against the earth, and the earth pushed back. Trees bowed, animals fled, humans whispered, and the watchers, their hearts split between love and regret, felt the weight of their choices settle into their bones like winter frost. One morning, when the sun rose pale and uncertain behind a veil of thin clouds, Sariel stood upon a ridge overlooking the valley. The first city gleamed below, but its beauty no longer filled him with quiet pride. Instead, he felt a heaviness pressing against his spirit, as though the city's foundations carried a hidden crack, widening with every passing hour. The air buzzed with the faint hum of knowledge humans were not ready for. In distant corridors, men experimented with symbols they barely understood symbols. The angels had whispered, without foreseeing how quickly human curiosity would ignite. Sariel closed his eyes, listening. He heard the trembling of wood grains splitting beneath the grip of a frustrated giant. He heard the sharp whisper of a human voice saying, "Build higher." He heard the quiet, aching heartbeat of the earth beneath his feet. Something was unraveling. Far below, in one of the city's wide courtyards, Arak knelt beside a group of children, tracing shapes in the dust patterns he remembered from the lullabies his mother sang before he grew too large for her lap. The children laughed and tried to imitate him, their small fingers awkwardly tracing spirals and suns. Arak smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, to the mountains where he knew other giants, Rome giants, whose footsteps echoed with less innocence than his. A girl tugged at his hand. "Arak, draw another," she chirped. He hesitated. Then he drew a circle, and inside it he traced a single crack, branching across like lightning. The children frowned. "What's that?" Arak didn't answer. He didn't know how. That same afternoon, as wind swept across the valley with an edge that felt too cold for the season, a council of watchers gathered beneath the tall cedars that bordered the city. Their faces glowed with troubled radiance. Their voices, usually serene, were tight with quiet urgency. "We must intervene," one said. "The Nephilim grow stronger than we imagined. Their hunger grows with them. Humans lean too heavily on knowledge that was not meant for them," another murmured. "They seek the heavens with hands not ready to hold its fire." "But what would you have us do?" Sariel asked, his voice low, weary. "Retract what we've given? Take back their tools? Undo their progress? They would see us as tyrants." A third watcher folded his wings. "Then what remains? Watch the world fracture." Sariel looked toward the city, its walls gleaming with pride, its towers reaching just a little higher each month. He felt the ache of an old truth. Choices cannot be unmade. Paths cannot be forgotten. Hearts, once awakened, cannot return to sleep. "We must remind them," he said at last, "of the covenant." The others fell silent. The covenant, an ancient understanding woven into creation itself. A vow of distance. A vow of balance. A vow that heaven would watch, but not interfere too deeply, a vow already broken. "How?" whispered a watcher. "They no longer see the line between our world and theirs." Sariel's gaze darkened. "Then we must show them." As twilight crept across the valley, firelight flickered in countless homes. Humans celebrated their achievements, unaware that they stood on the edge of a precipice. Giants wandered the outskirts, their silhouettes massive and solemn against the rising moon. And beneath the soil, deeper than roots, deeper than stone, deeper than memory, the earth trembled. Not with anger, not with judgment, but with a warning. A covenant had been broken, and the world was beginning to feel the crack. The tremor beneath the soil spread through the land like a quiet shiver, so subtle that humans mistook it for the settling of the earth. But the watchers felt it sharply, an ancient resonance they had hoped never to hear again. It was the sound of boundaries straining, of laws older than the stars, bending beneath the weight of choices made by heavenly beings who never intended to reshape the fate of the world. The covenant, once steady as the pillars of creation, was beginning to fracture. Sariel walked through the city at dusk, his steps slow, thoughtful. Lanterns glowed along the stone walls, casting shifting shapes across carved patterns and towering arches. Children ran barefoot between homes, their laughter tumbling through the streets like small rivers of joy. To them, the city was a wonder, a place born from hope, a place built with giant hands and angelic wisdom. They did not sense the unease that pulsed beneath every stone. They did not hear the whispers rising from the earth. They did not see the invisible shadow stirring around their future. But Sariel saw it, and he feared what would come if the world continued on this path. As he passed through a wide plaza, he found a group of humans gathered around a massive slab of polished rock. On its surface glowed faint markings, not carved, but burned with shimmering precision. Men traced the symbols with reverent hands. Women whispered excitedly about what they thought each spiral and line might unlock. The Watchers had taught them simple signs for tracking seasons and recording stories, but these markings were deeper, older, dangerous. Sariel drew closer, breath tightening. These were sigils of the heavens, patterns only angels should know, symbols that guided the balance of storms and the rhythm of night. They were never meant to be etched into stone by human hands. "Who taught you these?" Sariel asked quietly. The men turned, startled by his sudden presence. One bowed respectfully. "Great One, we only copied what we saw." He pointed toward the mountains. "There are giants who carved these in the cliffs. They said they remembered them from their fathers, from the Watchers of the sky." Sariel closed his eyes. The giants born from the angels' descent had inherited memories not meant for mortal minds. Echoes of celestial knowledge wove through their blood like dormant sparks, awakening in unpredictable ways. What they carved, humans revered. What they revealed, humans followed. The covenant's breach was deepening through the children of both worlds. "Do not study these," Sariel warned gently. "They are not for you to hold." But the people only murmured to one another, glancing back at the glowing symbols with longing. Knowledge, once tasted, could not be forgotten. Desire, once awakened, could not be silenced. And Sariel knew that these warnings, no matter how softly or lovingly given, would soon be ignored. Far beyond the city, in a valley where shadows stretched long beneath ancient pines, Arak sat alone beside a quiet stream. The water curled around his feet, reflecting fractured pieces of the moon. His enormous hands rested limply in his lap, fingers twitching with an emotion he couldn't name. He could feel the earth's unrest. He could feel humans pulling away. He could feel giants pushing outward. And worst of all, he could feel something stirring inside himself, an energy that wasn't entirely his, a strength growing heavier and harder to control with each passing day. When he clenched his fists, the ground cracked. When he grew sorrowful, trees leaned as if afraid of falling. When he breathed deeply, the wind changed direction. He no longer knew where he ended, and the world began. Sariel approached quietly, not wanting to startle him, but Arak sensed him regardless. He turned his head, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "It's getting worse," Arak whispered. "I know," Sariel said softly. "The covenant is straining. You feel it, because you were born in the space where the world breaks." Arak lowered his gaze to the water. "Am I the cause?" "No," Sariel answered, placing a gentle hand against Arak's massive arm. "You are the result. The cause lies with us, the Watchers who stepped too near." Arak swallowed hard. "Then what happens now?" Sariel's wings drooped. "Now, we must try to mend what is breaking, before the world splits open beneath us." The stream gurgled softly, as if whispering secrets it had overheard from the mountains. The wind carried a low moan across the valley. The sky shifted, dimming ever so slightly as clouds gathered where none should be. The covenant had cracked. The earth felt it. The giants carried it. The humans began to awaken to it. And the heavens, The heavens were watching. Night crept deeper across the valley, spreading shadows that felt heavier than darkness alone. The giants stirred in their distant shelters, restless beneath the weight of an ache they didn't understand. Humans tossed in their sleep, dreaming of storms and trembling ground. And the watchers, perched along the ridges and rooftops, felt the fragile threads of creation tightening like a net drawn too far in every direction. Something ancient was shifting slowly, steadily beneath them all. Sariel and Arak remained by the stream, its waters glimmering like shards of trapped moonlight. The silence between them was not empty, it was full of things neither could say. Arak stared into the water, watching the reflection of his immense silhouette tremble with each ripple. "Do the heavens regret us?" he asked at last, voice barely above a whisper. Sariel felt the question strike through him like a cold wind. "Regret?" he murmured. "No. Heaven does not regret what was born from love." Arak's jaw tightened. "But we are breaking the world." "No," Sariel said again, though his voice dimmed. "The world is breaking because we angels forgot our place. You were born into the fracture, Arak. You didn't cause it." Arak's eyes glistened. "Yet I feel the break inside me, like a crack running through my bones." Sariel did not answer. He couldn't. He, too, felt the fracture, felt the weight of a choice he couldn't undo, a path he couldn't turn back from. In the distance, lightning flickered along the horizon, though no storm clouds had gathered. A silent flash, white, then gone. Arak stiffened. Sariel lifted his face to the sky, sensing something wrong in that brief illumination. Lightning without storm was a sign older than the world, older than the angels themselves. It meant heaven was watching with stern eyes, and that judgment, once patient, was beginning to stir. But the night didn't speak of this to the humans sleeping in their homes. It simply wrapped them in cold air and uneasy dreams. Far beyond the city walls, in the depths of a forest that had grown wild and twisted under the giants' wandering steps, a different gathering took place. Several giants, brothers and sisters of Arak, though scattered by distance and fate, had assembled around a ring of broken trees. Their bodies towered above the branches, their eyes glowing dimly with confusion and anger. One, a giant named Caird, slammed his fist into the ground, cracking the soil. "They fear us," he growled. "The humans whisper as if we are beasts." Another giant, taller and leaner, nodded slowly. "Maybe we should leave them, live far from their small fears." A third, her hair tangled with leaves, shook her head. "Where would we go? The forests break beneath us. The mountains tremble when we climb. The world is too small." Caird snarled. "Then we will make space." His words settled over the group like a shadow. Not yet violence, not yet rebellion, but the seed of something dangerous, something that could grow in the cracks of the world, if left unattended. In that moment, a faint tremor rippled beneath their feet, a message carried through the bones of the earth itself. The giants fell silent, listening. "What is that?" whispered the tallest one. No one answered. The tremor was not a warning, not a threat. It was a cry from the earth, from creation, from something deep and ancient that sensed the covenant, snapping thread by thread, back by the stream. Sariel felt the tremor too. He closed his eyes, placing his palm against the soil. "The world is speaking," he whispered. Arak swallowed. "What is it saying?" Sariel's voice dropped to a haunted hush. "Balance is breaking." Arak's heart clenched. "Can it be healed?" Sariel lifted his gaze toward the dark horizon, where the flash of unnatural lightning had stirred the heavens. "I do not know," he said slowly. "But if we do nothing, the break will swallow all of us." Above them, the stars flickered uneven, trembling, as if echoing the earth's unrest. The covenant, once woven into the bones of creation, had begun to splinter, and every creature, human, giant, or angel, felt the jagged edge of what was coming. The next morning rose with a strange stillness, as if the dawn itself hesitated before stepping into the world. Light filtered through the clouds in thin, uneven strands, casting long shadows across the valley. Even the birds seemed reluctant to sing. Humans emerged from their homes with furrowed brows, sensing a tension in the air they could not name. Giants wandered the outskirts with restless steps. The watchers stood silently along the ridges and rooftops, wings folded tight, eyes narrowed upon a horizon that felt too quiet. Sariel walked beside Arak through the dew-covered fields. Each step Arak took pressed deep impressions into the soil prints filled with uncertainty, longing, and a swelling fear he couldn't hide. He had slept little, troubled by dreams that felt less like imagination and more like foretelling. Dreams of earth cracking under his feet, dreams of storms with no rain, dreams of a great voice calling his name from beneath the ground. He glanced at Sariel. "Is this what happens when the covenant breaks?" Sariel sighed, the sound soft and heavy. "This is only the beginning. When a boundary set by heaven fractures, the whole world feels the wound." Arak swallowed hard, his fingers curling around the edge of his tunic. "Can you mend it?" "No," Sariel whispered. "We can only try to soften what follows." They walked in silence until the city walls rose before them, towering and proud. Yet even here, something felt wrong. The air hummed not with the excited energy of creation, but with a deeper, heavier tone, a hum that belonged to stone under pressure, to hearts under strain, to a world struggling to carry what it was never meant to hold. Inside the city, men gathered around the great stone slab, where celestial sigils glowed faintly. They traced them with shaking fingers, speaking in low, fevered voices. "These are the secrets of angels. These symbols will show us how to rise higher. We can command the winds, the storms, perhaps even life itself." Sariel felt his chest tighten. Their ambition was no longer simple curiosity. It was hunger. A hunger fed by fear of giants, pride in achievement, and the ancient whisper that first led a star-bright being to fall from heaven's height long before the world existed. He stepped forward, voice firm but sorrowful. "Stop this." The men turned. Some bowed, others tightened their lips, but did not lower their hands. "You do not understand," Sariel said. "These inscriptions bind the forces that hold your world together. To use them without knowledge is to strike the spine of creation." A young man lifted his chin. "We only seek what you already possess." "And at what cost?" Sariel asked softly. The question hung in the air. No one answered. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the western gate. Arak's massive form stiffened. Sariel turned sharply, wings flaring with alarm. They ran, one with heavy pounding strides, the other gliding above the ground in a blur of light. At the gate, they found a group of villagers staring wide-eyed at the massive figure approaching from the forest, Caird, the giant whose anger had cracked the earth the night before. His chest heaved. His eyes glowed like molten metal. Behind him, several smaller giants hovered, torn between following him and fleeing from the destruction they sensed within him. "Caird!" Arak called, stepping forward. Caird's gaze snapped toward him. Pain and fury warred inside his massive face. "They are afraid of us," Caird growled. "They hide when we pass. They whisper of driving us away. We were born from their world, yet we have no place in it." Arak approached slowly, palms open. "Brother, listen." "No!" Caird roared, slamming his fist into the ground. The earth cracked like dry clay. Dust billowed upward. Humans stumbled back in terror. "Why should we shrink ourselves to make them comfortable? Why should our strength be a curse?" Arak's heart broke. "Because the world is fragile. Because they are fragile." Caird bared his teeth. "Then let the world become stronger." The words struck Arak like a blow. Sariel stepped between them, wings raised. "Caird, stop. This path will break more than stone." Kurd's eyes flashed. Perhaps the world must break before it can be rebuilt. A terrible quiet fell over the crowd, giants, humans, and angels all frozen in the rippling air. And as Kerd stepped forward, the ground shuddered beneath him, a tremor that spread outward, a tremor that matched the rhythm of the broken covenant, a tremor that whispered of what was coming. Arak reached toward him. "Brother, please." But it was too late. The crack in the earth widened, the crack in the covenant deepened, and the first shadow of judgment crept silently across the land. The world held its breath. After Kerd's furious blow split open the ground, a hush fell across the valley, deeper than any silence that had come before. It was as if creation itself paused, listening, waiting, bracing for something it could not yet name. The crack in the earth pulsed with faint light, trembling like a wound that reached deeper than soil, deeper than rock, down into the ancient bones of the world where the covenant once lay unbroken. Humans fled from the widening fissure, gathering their children and huddling near the walls of the city, their eyes darting between the giants and the trembling ground. Giants stepped back in shock, their massive forms trembling as fear crept into hearts that had never known it. And the Watchers felt the weight of the heavens settle upon their wings, cold and heavy as a winter storm gathering far beyond the sky. Sariel lowered his wings slowly, his gaze fixed on the crack as if reading a message written in pain. "It has begun," he whispered. Arak stood frozen beside him, his breath shaking, his heart pounding like thunder trapped inside a cavern. He looked at Kerd not with anger, but with a sorrow that carved deep lines across his soul. "What have you done?" he murmured. But Kerd's fury had already begun to wilt into dread. He stepped away from the fissure, shoulders shaking. I didn't mean." He looked at his hands, as though seeing them for the first time. "I was only angry. I didn't know the earth would—" "The earth reacts to you," Sariel said softly. "To all of you, because you were born of two forces that were never meant to merge. Your anger is not like human anger. Your pain is not like human pain. When you break, the world feels it." Kerd staggered backward, horrified. The humans watched him with wide, trembling eyes. A few of them whispered prayers into their hands. Some whispered fear into one another's ears. And for the first time, Arak saw something in their faces he had hoped never to see again. Not caution, not misunderstanding, but terror. A terror that remembered the roar from the forest. A terror that remembered the stone shattered beneath Kerd's blow. A terror that wondered whether the giants were not protectors, but omens. Sariel stepped forward and raised his voice, calm and clear. "Listen to me, all of you. This is not the time for division or fear. What we face now is larger than any of us." The ground shuddered again, this time more softly, as though echoing the truth of his words. Arak lowered himself to one knee beside the fissure. With hands as gentle as morning mist, he touched the broken soil, feeling its tremble rise through his arm like a heartbeat. It was not anger, not punishment, not yet. It was a warning one that pulsed with an ancient, sorrowful rhythm. "Someone is watching," Arak said suddenly. Sariel turned sharply toward him. "You feel it too?" Arak nodded. "Yes, like eyes on the wind." For a long moment no one moved. Then the wind shifted slowly, deliberately curling through the valley with a coldness that did not belong to the season. Leaves shivered, though no storm approached. Fires flickered, though no breath touched them. Even the giants felt the chill crawl beneath their skin. And then it came, not a sound, not a voice, but a presence. It fell upon the valley like a veil of unseen weight, pressing gently, sorrowfully, against every heart. Humans fell to their knees without understanding why. Giants bowed their heads, breath caught in their throats. Even Kerd sank slowly to the ground, trembling. Sariel whispered, "The heavens have turned their gaze toward the earth." Arak felt something vast and ancient brushing against his spirit, calm, mournful, unbearably heavy. It was not wrath, it was not fury, it was sorrowful, a sorrow older than the world, a sorrow that spoke of patience running thin. "The judgment walks," Sariel murmured, barely audible, "and it walks without sound." A gust of cold wind swept across the land, flattening grass and bending tree limbs. But when it passed, nothing visible remained, only the knowledge that something unseen had arrived, something that would not leave. Arak rose slowly, his enormous form trembling. "What does this mean?" Sariel looked at him with eyes full of ancient grief. "It means," he said softly, "that heaven has begun to count the days." The fissure pulsed once more, then fell still. In the distance, thunder rumbled across a cloudless sky. Judgment had entered the world, not with fire, not with rage, but with quiet steps and sorrow heavy enough to break mountains. The presence lingered long after the wind had stilled, like a cold breath resting over the valley. No one dared to speak at first. Even the fires crackled more quietly, as if afraid to break the silence. Humans huddled together in clusters, whispering prayers they barely remembered. Giants stood frozen, with their heads bowed, their massive frames trembling under a weight they did not understand. And the Watchers stared at the sky with eyes that shimmered with ancient dread. Sariel felt the presence settling into the bones of the earth as surely as a mountain pressed into its foundations. It was not the Creator's voice, no words thundered from the heavens. But judgment does not always speak aloud. Sometimes it arrives in quietness, in stillness, in a grief so immense it makes the world tremble. Arak stood gripping the edge of the cracked earth, breathing in slow, shuddering draws. He had felt the presence move through him, like a hand brushing across the surface of his soul, gentle but unyielding. It left behind a question he couldn't shake. Was he part of what heaven mourned? He rose slowly, turning toward the frightened villagers. Their faces were pale, their eyes darting fearfully between him and the fissure. He took one careful step backward, as though trying to make himself smaller before them. "I would never hurt you," he whispered. But fear had silenced their trust. One man finally spoke, voice cracking. "What was that? What has come upon us?" Sariel answered, stepping forward. "A warning." "A warning of what?" another villager cried out. Sariel's wings drooped. "Of imbalance. Of a world pulled too far from the shape it was meant to hold." A murmur rippled through the gathering. Some clutched their children closer. Others stared at the angels, with anger growing like a firestorm in their eyes. "You did this," a young man said, pointing at the Watchers. "You brought these giants into our world." Sariel did not look away. "We did. You gave us knowledge," the man continued, voice trembling. "Knowledge that was not meant for us. You taught us to build, to shape, to rise. And now the sky itself threatens us." "We tried to guide you," Sariel said softly. "We tried to love you." "Love," the man whispered, tears burning in his eyes. "Or pride." Arak stepped between them, lowering himself so he could meet the man's gaze. "This is not their fault," he said, "nor yours. The world is breaking because I exist, because we exist." "No," Sariel said sharply, turning to him. "You were born of love. Never blame yourself for the cracks that began long before your first breath." Arak's throat tightened. "Then why does the ground split beneath my feet? Why does heaven mourn when I move?" Before Sariel could answer, another tremor rippled beneath them so faint it barely stirred the dust, yet strong enough that every heart in the valley felt it. The presence deepened, as though the unseen Watcher pressed its palm more firmly against the earth. One of the older Watchers, Remaiah, appeared beside Sariel, her radiance dimmed by sorrow. "The decree is not yet spoken," she said quietly, "but it approaches." "What kind of decree?" Arak asked, voice hollow. Remaiah lifted her gaze toward the heavens. "A decree of correction." A cold hush fell. Humans swallowed hard. Giants clenched their fists. Even the trees seemed to lean toward her words, as if listening. "A world cannot survive when its balance is torn," Remaya whispered. "The covenant was once a boundary to protect you and us. But when we crossed it, we changed the nature of things. The giants were born from that fracture. Their strength is more than the world can bear." Arak felt his heart collapse inward. "Then what becomes of us?" Remaya looked at him with a tenderness that broke him more than any anger could. "The heavens do not act in haste. But judgment, true judgment, moves quietly. It gives warnings, it walks without sound, and it waits for the world to see what it has become." Sariel placed a hand on Arak's shoulder. "Nothing has been decreed yet. There is still time." "But time for what?" Arak whispered. "To fix what cannot be mended?" A sudden wind swept through the valley, curling around their feet like a restless spirit. Dust spiraled upward, forming brief, delicate patterns before falling again. Far above, the stars flickered, dimming then brightening as though shifting in unease. And somewhere beyond human eyes, beyond angelic sight, something vast was approaching the world. Not marching, not roaring, but gliding toward them with patient sorrow. Judgment had begun its walk, and it would not turn back. The valley grew quieter with each passing day, as though even the wind feared to disturb what had settled upon the world. Animals migrated away from the forests near the giant settlements. Birds circled high, crying warnings into the air before fleeing toward distant plains. The river that once laughed against its stones now moved with a slower, heavier rhythm, whispering to itself as if trying to remember a forgotten harmony. Everything felt watched. Everything felt suspended in a breath that refused to release. Arak felt it most. Each morning he woke with a weight around his heart, as though someone had placed an invisible hand upon his chest while he slept, not pressing, not hurting, but reminding him, "I am here. I am watching. Your world is changing." He wandered the outskirts of the city, with his steps carefully measured, as if afraid the earth might crack again beneath him. Children still ran to him, but their parents called them back more quickly now. Their eyes lingered on him with a mix of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for his help, fear for his size, his strength, the unknown pulsing beneath his skin. One afternoon, Arak sat on a hill overlooking the city. The towers sparkled in the sunlight, rising proudly toward the sky. Humans moved through the streets with determination, crafting, building, dreaming. Yet beneath their ambition, a tension twisted like a rope being pulled too tightly. They were reaching higher, learning faster, wanting more. Sariel joined him on the hill, folding his wings carefully before sitting beside the giant. For a while, they said nothing. They simply watched the city breathe, beautiful and troubled, alive and trembling. "You feel it growing," Sariel finally said. Arak nodded slowly. "Every time I breathe, I feel pressure, like the world is pushing back." "It is," Sariel whispered. "Not out of malice, but out of necessity. Creation must hold its shape. When something grows beyond its design, the world strains." Arak closed his eyes. "Am I that something?" Sariel hesitated, not because he wanted to lie, but because the truth was a blade that cut in every direction. "You are one part of it. The giants, the knowledge given too soon, the boundary we crossed, all of it weaves together." "And the presence?" Arak asked quietly. "The thing that watches us?" Sariel looked to the east, where the horizon shivered faintly with a strange light. "It grows nearer." Arak's throat tightened. "What will it do when it arrives?" Sariel exhaled a breath that felt too heavy for an immortal being. "Judgment does not rush. It does not take pleasure in what must be done. It walks through the world, observing every heart, every life, every choice. It examines the fractures. It measures the imbalance. It decides not with anger, but with truth." Arak stared at the ground. "And what truth does it see in me?" Sariel reached out, placing his hand against Arak's enormous arm. "It sees your kindness. It sees your struggle. It sees your longing to belong. Judgment is not blind to goodness, but goodness alone cannot hold a world together. Arak swallowed hard. What if the world would be better without me, without us? Sariel's eyes darkened with grief. Do not speak that. You are not a mistake. But I break everything I touch, Arak whispered. No, Sariel said firmly. You reveal what was already fragile. Arak turned away as tears gathered in his eyes, tears that fell heavily onto the earth, leaving deep, dark impressions in the soil. Then, what am I to do? Stay near, Sariel murmured. We may yet find a path that does not end in ruin. But even as he said it, Sariel's gaze drifted toward the east, toward the shimmering light, creeping closer, like a quiet tide rising over the edge of the world. That evening, as the sun melted into crimson and gold, the cities of men grew restless. People gathered on rooftops, pointing toward the glowing phenomenon that hovered far beyond the horizon. No clouds surrounded it, no storms birthed it. It was a light that pulsed softly, like the beating of a celestial heart, too slow, too steady, too sorrowful to be anything natural. Some thought it a sign of blessing, some believed it an omen, but the watchers knew better. They felt its gravity, its gaze, its purpose. Judgment was no longer watching from afar. It was drawing near step by silent step, breath by quiet breath, carrying sorrow enough to flood the world. And when it arrived, nothing would remain unchanged. The light on the horizon grew brighter with each passing night, though no flame fed it, no cloud carried it, no star claimed it. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, one beat every few moments, like the slow exhale of something vast and sorrowful. The world felt its approach. Trees leaned subtly toward it, as if drawn by an ancient memory. Rivers shifted their currents, whispering warnings through their winding paths. Even the mountains, silent and unyielding, seemed to hum with a deep, uneasy vibration. Humans gathered in hushed clusters outside their homes each evening, staring toward the strange glow. Children clung tightly to their mothers. Men whispered theories in trembling voices. Some claimed it was a great spirit, rising to bless them. Others feared it was the return of something old and terrible, remembered in fractured stories passed down through tribes. The giants watched too, restless beneath the growing tension. Their bodies, attuned to the earth in ways humans could never understand, vibrated faintly with the presence. They felt a pressure curling beneath their skin, a heaviness in their limbs, a stirring in their blood, an instinctive warning carried from the ancient meeting of heaven's fire and earth's clay. Arak stood atop the highest tower of the city, his silhouette carved against the dusky sky. From there, he could see the lights of the settlements scattered across valleys, the shadows of forests where giants wandered, the distant rivers glowing like serpents in the fading Sunday, but his gaze remained fixed on the pulsing light in the east. Sariel joined him, wings folded close. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood beside Arak, letting the silence weave itself around them like a fragile thread. At length, Arak's voice broke the stillness. It grows closer. Sariel nodded. Yes. What will it do? Arak asked, his voice shaking. Will it strike the cities, the giants? Will it tear the world apart? Sariel closed his eyes. Judgment rarely strikes without first showing mercy. It watches, it weighs, it searches every heart. It listens to the cries of the earth. Arak swallowed hard. And what has the earth cried? Sariel opened his eyes again, his voice low and mournful. It cries of imbalance. It cries of pain. It cries of a covenant broken. It cries of a creation strained beyond what it can bear. Arak turned away, grief carving itself deeper inside his chest. Then it is because of us. It is because of all of us, Sariel corrected gently. Because we loved where we were forbidden to love. Because we gave what was not meant to be given. Because humans reached faster than they grew. because giants were born of a world unprepared to hold them. Below, in the city streets, humans had begun lighting lanterns, sending tiny flames drifting into the sky as though trying to push back the growing light on the horizon. Giants stood on the outskirts, watching their small companions with expressions full of longing and fear. The watchers gathered quietly on rooftops and ridges, their wings dim, their faces carved with sorrow. Suddenly, the pulsing light flared, just once, but bright enough to illuminate the valley, as though dawn had arrived hours too soon. A shock rippled across the land, a gentle but powerful tremor that rolled beneath the soil like a wave. Children cried out, animals stampede. The giants clutched their heads as a strange pressure filled their minds. Arak staggered, gripping the tower wall. Sariel held him steady. "What was that?" Arak gasped. Sariel's expression grew hollow. A reaching. "Yes," Sariel whispered. "Judgment has extended its awareness across the land. It sees everything now, every heart, every intention, every fracture." Arak felt the truth of it striking deep into his bones. It wasn't anger pressing upon the world, it was sorrow. Infinite sorrow. Sorrow that had endured too long. The light dimmed once more, returning to its soft, rhythmic pulse. Arak sank to his knees. "Tell me there is hope." Sariel knelt beside him. "There is always hope," he murmured, "but hope does not stop the truth, and truth has begun its walk." Arak stared at the distant glow, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. "What will become of us?" Sariel looked toward the horizon, where judgment approached like a rising tide. "That," he whispered, "is what heaven has come to decide." And in the quiet that followed, the world held its breath again, waiting for the next step of the sorrow that walked without sound. The glow of judgment still pulsed on the horizon, but far from the trembling cities and wandering giants, a quiet valley slept beneath a softer sky. Here, the air carried no weight of ambition, no whispers of sigils carved into forbidden stone. The soil was rich, the rivers clear, the trees tall and steady. It was a place untouched, not by angels, not by giants, not by the hunger that had taken root in the hearts of men. And in this untouched place lived a man whose presence felt like a lingering whisper of the world before it fractured. His name was Noah. He lived humbly, tending the earth with hands calloused but gentle. His home was built of simple timber. His days were spent guiding his family, caring for flocks, walking quietly beneath the shade of ancient trees. But there was something different about him, something the world, in all its noise and confusion, had nearly forgotten. Noah lived with a calmness that did not come from ignorance. It came from listening. He listened to the soil beneath his feet, the way it sighed under the weight of time. He listened to the rivers as they whispered over stones, carrying memories of distant mountains. He listened to the wind, sensing the messages it carried from places far beyond sight. He listened to the faint groan of creation, a groan that had grown louder in recent years. While others chased ambition, Noah chased understanding. While cities reached upward and giants roamed in sorrow, Noah walked with a certainty that the world was changing, and he must remain steady. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the sky was pale as river mist, Noah would stand atop a hill overlooking his valley. There, he would breathe deeply, letting the cool air fill his lungs. He felt the world shifting beneath its surface, like a great beast stirring in its sleep. Something old, something inevitable, something sorrowful. But Noah did not fear it. For as long as he could remember, he had felt watched, not by judgment, but by compassion. There were moments when he sensed a whisper brushing against the edge of his soul, a voice older than the stars, speaking without words, telling him to listen, to wait, to remain pure in a world growing blind. In another part of the valley, Sariel watched him from the treetops, hidden behind the shimmer of angelic concealment. His wings were folded close, his face softened with an emotion he had not felt since the early days of creation. "No wonder," Sariel whispered. For Noah carried something rare, something long lost in the forests of ambition and the shadows of giants. He carried obedience, the kind that comes not from fear, but from love, the kind that listens for a divine whisper even when the world is drowned in noise. Noah descended the hill with quiet steps, unaware that an angel watched him with aching reverence. He tended his animals, repaired his tools, sang softly as he worked. His voice was low, soothing, almost like a lullaby carried from another age. His children played nearby, drawing pictures in the dust. His wife hummed as she wove baskets beneath the shade of a fig tree. Their life was simple, but not empty. It was a life tethered to humility, to peace, to the rhythm of creation before it cracked. That afternoon, as the sun warmed the valley, Noah stopped mid-task, lifting his head. He felt something shift in the wind, something faint, like a heartbeat, brushing the edge of his awareness. The same presence that hovered over the cities had reached here, but its touch was softer, gentler, as though tasting the air before deciding what to do. Noah closed his eyes, and in the stillness he heard it. Not words, not thunder, but a tone deep, mournful, resonant, a tone that echoed through the bones of the earth, through the threads of the sky, through the quiet chambers of the soul. He looked toward the horizon, where the strange light pulsed slowly, steadily. "It is time," Noah whispered. Serial's breath caught above him. Noah did not yet know what would be asked of him. He did not know what storms were gathering. Beyond the veil, he did not know that he alone, of all humankind, still carried a spark of the first light, the original harmony before angels fell and giants rose. But heaven knew, and judgment knew, and the world itself seemed to lean toward him, as though waiting for the man who listened to hear the next whisper. The last echo of the first light had been found. The whisper lingered long after it brushed Noah's spirit, leaving the air around him trembling with a meaning he could not yet grasp. He stood quietly in the field, one hand resting on the wooden tool he'd been using moments before, the other pressed gently against his chest, as though steadying a heartbeat that no longer felt like only his own. His wife watched him from beneath the fig tree, sensing the change, though she didn't understand it. Noah had always been a man of stillness, but this stillness felt deeper, heavier, touched by something sacred. He returned to his work, but the wind followed him like a shadow. It curled around his ankles when he walked. It rustled the leaves near his ears, even when the rest of the valley lay in breathless calm. It was as though creation itself was trying to speak to him softly, urgently before the world grew too loud to hear. Serial moved from the treetops to the valley floor, gliding silently until his feet touched the grass. He stayed hidden from human sight, but he walked close enough to feel the warmth of Noah's presence. Angels did not often feel warmth, not the way mortals did, but something emanated from Noah, as gentle and real as sunlight on spring soil. "This is the one," Serial whispered. He felt the truth ring through him like a chord struck in perfect harmony. Noah stood not as a man shaped by ambition, nor as one pulled by pride, nor as one trembling beneath fear. He stood like an anchor, quiet, steady, rooted in something older than the world's confusion. Noah's children gathered near him, laughing as they chased each other around the field. He smiled at them, his face creasing softly. When his youngest stumbled, Noah caught him with arms strong enough to lift, yet gentle enough to comfort. There was strength in him, but a strength that served, not conquered, a strength that bowed before love, rather than rising for power. Sariel felt something tighten in his chest, a rare ache that angels seldom tasted. Hope. As evening settled across the valley, Noah lit a small fire outside his home. His family gathered around it, sharing food, stories, and simple joys that flickered like glowing embers in a growing world of shadows. Noah sat quietly, listening more than he spoke, listening to the fire, listening to the breath of his children, listening to the faint tremor within the earth. At last, when the flames had softened to amber tongues, Noah excused himself and walked toward the edge of the valley. The sky above him stretched into endless darkness, pierced by stars that shimmered like distant promises. The pulsing light of judgment glowed faintly to the east, still far but unmistakably closer than before. Noah stood beneath the heavens and closed his eyes. And this time the whisper became a voice. It did not thunder, it did not burn, it did not command with harshness. It spoke like a father speaks to a child, waking from a nightmare, soft, steady, full of grief, yet full of purpose. Noah. His eyes opened slowly. The voice moved through him with the gentleness of light through morning mist. It filled his veins. It wrapped around his heart. It settled on his shoulders like a mantle woven from memory and destiny. Noah, the voice said again, the world has turned from the harmony it once knew. Noah swallowed, breath trembling. The earth mourns. The balance breaks. The hearts of many have grown dim, but yours, a pause, a breath like warm wind brushing his face. Yours carries the echo of the first light. Tears filled Noah's eyes, not from fear, but from recognition. He had felt different his whole life, though he never named it. He had felt the world's sorrow, though he never understood why. He had felt watched, wrapped, guided. "What must I do?" Noah whispered. Sariel, hidden among the trees, closed his eyes. He felt the moments shifting. He felt the heavens bending closer. The voice answered with a calm that shook the leaves. "Prepare, Noah." Noah's breath caught. "For what?" he whispered. The wind grew still. The stars flickered. Even the distant pulse of judgment paused for a single heartbeat. "For what is coming upon the earth?" The words settled over Noah like a mantle of shadow and light. And though he did not yet understand them, his soul bowed in quiet acceptance. For he was Noah, the last echo of the first light. Noah stood beneath the vast spread of the night sky long after the voice faded into the hush of the valley. The world around him seemed transformed, each sound sharper, each breath deeper, each star carrying a weight he had never felt before. His heart throbbed with a rhythm that felt older than his life, older than his lineage, older even than the hills surrounding him. Something sacred had awakened within him, and the valley, quiet, gentle, forgotten by the rising pride of the world, seemed to lean closer to hear the echo of the message left in his soul. He walked back toward the glow of the fire, but stopped before stepping into the light. His children slept against their mother, curled like small fawns beneath her arms. His wife hummed softly, running her fingers through their tangled hair. The sight filled Noah with warmth and dread, because now the knowledge he carried was not simply his own, it belonged to them too. Whatever the coming storm was, whatever judgment stalked the world in silence, they were tied to its unfolding. From the shadows, Sariel watched him with soft, grieving eyes. He knew this burden well, the weight of knowledge, the ache of foreseeing sorrow before it arrives. Noah had not yet been shown the fullness of what was coming, but the first thread had been laid gently in his hands, and Sariel sensed that soon the entire tapestry would be revealed. Noah sat in the doorway of his simple home, hands resting on his knees, eyes gazing at nothing. The voice had spoken only a few words, but they filled his thoughts like rising floodwaters. "Prepare, Noah, prepare." He did not understand what to prepare for. He did not know what shape the coming danger would take, but every part of him, mind, heart, spirit, knew that the world's quiet peace was ending. The earth groaned faintly beneath him, a soft tremor, almost tender in its sorrow. Noah pressed his palm against the ground, and the soil almost seemed to breathe beneath his touch, whispering its ancient grief. "What is breaking?" he murmured. The wind answered with a shiver through the tall grass, carrying the faintest scent of distant rain, rain that had not yet fallen but waited in unborn clouds. Behind him, Sariel's voice drifted from the shadows, gentle as a lullaby. "The world, Noah. The world is breaking." Noah turned slightly, unable to see the angel but recognizing the tone. "Why speak to me?" he asked quietly. "I am no king, no great warrior, only a man who tills the soil." Sariel stepped forward, allowing his form to shimmer faintly in the moonlight, just enough for Noah to sense the presence of something holy. "That is why," Sariel said, "greatness does not prepare hearts. Humility does. A king would ask for power. A warrior would reach for a blade. But you, Noah, you listen." Noah lowered his head. "What must I do?" Sariel hesitated. "You will be shown, but not all at once. The Creator gives burdens in measures the heart can bear." Noah looked to the horizon, where the distant light of judgment still pulsed like a slow heartbeat. "This light, I feel it watching us." "It watches all," Sariel murmured. "It weighs the rising pride of cities. It listens to the heavy footsteps of giants who were never meant to walk the earth. It hears the songs humans were not ready to sing. And it feels the world strain beneath what has been born." Noah swallowed. "And what does it want?" Sariel closed his eyes. "Balance." Silence stretched between them, long, fragile, sacred. Noah breathed deeply. "I will do what I'm asked, whatever it is." The angel's expression softened with an admiration rarely felt by the heavenly host. "That is why you were chosen." From inside the home, Noah's wife stirred, murmuring his name in her sleep. Noah turned toward her voice, tenderness flowing through him like warm water. He rose slowly, brushing his hand against the doorway. "My family," he whispered, "will they be safe?" Sariel's gaze darkened with grief, not for Noah, but for the truth he carried. "Stay close to the voice that calls you. Obey, even when you do not understand, and they will walk with you on the path laid before you." Noah nodded, though fear tightened in his chest like a closing hand. He stepped into the home, his shadow stretching long across the floor as the distant pulsing light reflected in his eyes. Outside, Sariel remained still beneath the stars. He knew this was only the beginning, for soon the whisper would return. It would bring instructions shaped from sorrow and salvation, and Noah, gentle, obedient, listening Noah, would be asked to build something the world had never seen, to survive something the world had never faced. The next morning rose with a hush that felt almost sacred. Dew clung to the leaves like tiny pearls, shimmering beneath the early Sunday. Birds sang in soft, tentative notes, as though unsure whether to welcome the day or whisper warnings into it. Noah stepped outside his home, with a quiet awareness settling deeper into his bones. Something in the light had changed. Something in the air had shifted. The world seemed to be balancing on the edge of a breath. He moved through his daily chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, clearing debris from the garden, but every motion felt touched by a higher weight, as though unseen eyes watched each step. His children chased one another through the grass, unaware of the silent tide rising around them. His wife kneaded bread, humming under her breath, though her eyes lingered on Noah longer than usual. She sensed it too, the change, the heaviness, the call. By midday, the sky dimmed unexpectedly. Clouds gathered in strange, swirling layers, though no storm broke. Noah stepped into the open field and scanned the horizon, his heart tightening. Sariel appeared beside him, shimmering into sight, with wings folded tightly, his face troubled. "It draws nearer," he said. Noah nodded. "I can feel it." Sariel watched the sky, his gaze flickering with concern. When judgment approaches, the world prepares itself. Creation bends, winds change. Even the animals understand what humans often forget: the earth has memory. Noah swallowed hard. "What must I do?" The angel turned to him, the weight of heaven reflected in his eyes. "You must listen again. The voice will speak soon, and when it does, it will not whisper." Noah's breath caught. His hands tightened at his sides. "Am I ready?" "You are willing," Sariel said. "That is what heaven sees. That is what heaven chooses." The clouds shifted, revealing a brief shaft of white gold sunlight that warmed Noah's face. He closed his eyes, letting the warmth seep into him like a blessing. But it lasted only a moment before the sky dimmed again. That night, sleep came slowly. Noah lay awake beside his wife, listening to her steady breathing, memorizing the rise and fall of her chest. His children slept nearby, tangled in soft blankets, their faces peaceful and untroubled. Noah closed his eyes and prayed not for himself, but for them. "Let me be strong enough," he murmured in the quiet darkness. "Whatever you ask of me, let me be strong enough." And as though carried by that prayer, the presence returned. The walls of the home did not shake. The ground did not tremble. Instead, the room filled with warmth, not heat, but a gentle radiance like the first light of creation returning to the world. Noah opened his eyes. He felt the presence not outside, not above, but within, as though the voice had stepped into the deepest chamber of his soul. Noah. He sat upright, breathing unsteady. The earth is filled with violence. The hearts of many have turned toward destruction. The giants, born of mingled realms, strain the world beneath their steps. Knowledge grows faster than wisdom. Ambition rises higher than humility. And sorrow fills the heavens. Tears brimmed in Noah's eyes. "What can I do?" The voice answered with the softness of a river and the gravity of a mountain. "Build." The word echoed through him, settling into every part of his being. "Build what?" Noah whispered. "A vessel," the voice said. "A refuge for what must endure, a shelter against what must come. Build a structure unlike any seen on the earth, a sanctuary that will carry life through the waters of purification." Noah's breath caught as the meaning pressed into him. "Waters?" he whispered. "What waters?" Silence answered at first. Then a breath, a sigh heavy with divine sorrow. "The world must be cleansed, Noah. The covenant broken has wounded creation. Judgment walks closer with each dawn. Soon the skies will open. Soon the depth will rise. Soon the earth will be washed of its violence." Noah trembled. His hands shook. "Why me? I am only one man. You are the one who listens." Noah bowed his head. "Tell me what to build." And the voice, the same voice that formed the stars, that breathed life into dust, that mourned the fracture of realms, began to pour instructions into Noah's spirit, dimensions shaped by divine wisdom, materials drawn from the memory of creation, a structure vast enough to cradle generations and gentle enough to carry the future in its wooden womb. Noah wept not from fear, but from awe. Awe that he, a simple man of the soil, had been chosen to hold the last echo of the world's first light. When the voice faded, the room returned to stillness. Noah lay back down beside his wife, tears drying on his cheeks. Tomorrow, he will begin. And far across the land beyond towers, beyond forests, beyond wandering giants, the pulse of judgment glowed brighter, counting down the days until the world would be washed clean. The world did not know the storm that was coming, not yet. Dawn still rose each morning in soft gold, brushing the hills with warmth. Rivers still wound gently through their banks, whispering over stones. Children still laughed in the fields, chasing each other beneath the wide, unbroken sky. Giants still roamed the forests, their shadows moving through the trees like living myths. And in the cities built by ambition and angelic guidance, people still shaped stone with hungry pride, dreaming of heights they had no wisdom to carry. But beneath all this ordinary beauty, something deeper stirred, an ancient tension, winding tighter with each passing day. The earth felt it, the winds felt it. Even the animals glanced nervously toward the distant horizon, sensing a change too heavy for human hearts to perceive. And Noah heard the sorrow in the silence. He rose before the sun, stepping barefoot into the dew-soaked grass. The air pulsed faintly around him, carrying the echo of the voice that had spoken in the night. He felt the weight of its words resting on him like a mantle of invisible fire. Build. He had not told his family yet. Not because he doubted Noah did not doubt the one who spoke to him in the stillness, but because he needed to breathe the command quietly, alone, before shaping it into words for others. He knelt beside the earth and placed both palms against the soil. The ground was colder than usual, too cold for early dawn. The soil trembled faintly beneath his touch, as if whispering of the waters slumbering in the deep, waiting for the moment they would be called forth. Noah stood slowly. His breath left him in a thin cloud. The world felt both familiar and foreign, like a dream seconds before waking. He turned toward the distant hills, where the light of judgment pulsed faintly behind the horizon, steady, slow, sorrowful. Each pulse felt closer, as though the heavens were drawing breath for something immense. Far away, in the city of stone, Sariel stood atop a high tower, wings folded tight against his back. He gazed toward Noah's valley, sensing the shift in the fabric of creation. He did not need to hear the voice to know it had been spoken. Something in the air had softened around the quiet man, a glow, a reverence, the beginning of a divine purpose. Beside Sariel, the giant Arak leaned against the tower wall, his immense frame bent with exhaustion. "It grows stronger," he murmured. "I feel it in my bones." Sariel nodded. "Judgment draws closer." Arak lowered his head. "And I fear what it will mean for us." The angel's eyes softened. "Fear is the only thing that still shows your heart is tender." Arak looked away, his jaw trembling. Below them, the city moved through its morning rituals, markets opening, craftsmen arranging tools, children running through the streets. But the hum of pride that once filled the city now fractured beneath the weight of unease. People woke from troubled dreams. Tools slipped in trembling hands. Even the walls seemed to sigh beneath their own height. Noah returned to his home. His wife looked up from kneading dough, sensing the shift in his expression. "You heard something," she whispered. Noah nodded. She wiped her hands and stepped toward him, her warm palm resting on his cheek. "Tell me." Noah took her hand and pressed it to his heart. "The world is changing," he said softly. "The voice has spoken. It has shown me what must be done." Her breath caught. Fear flickered behind her eyes, but she did not pull away. She had always trusted him, trusted the quiet wisdom in his gaze, the calm certainty in his steps. "What must we do?" she asked. Noah's eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. "We must build something," he said, "something vast, something the world has never seen." She swallowed. "Why?" Noah breathed deeply, letting the truth settle between them like falling dust. "Because the waters are coming." The room fell silent. Outside, the wind shifted direction. A long, slow sigh rippled through the grass. Far beyond the horizon, the pulsing light brightened, as though judgment had heard Noah speak its name. The word waters hung in the air long after Noah spoke it, settling into the wooden beams of the home, into the quiet breaths of his sleeping children, into the trembling heart of his wife. She did not question him, not because she fully understood, but because she could feel the truth vibrating through his voice. Noah had never spoken lightly, and the presence that had begun to surround him in recent days was unmistakable. It was as if creation itself leaned toward him when he stepped into the light. She closed her hand around his. "Then show me," she whispered, and together they stepped outside. The valley greeted them with a stillness that felt almost reverent. The sky above was soft and pale, but heavy with a sorrow that seemed to press against the edges of the world. Noah inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the task rising inside him like a tide. He led his wife toward the grove at the valley's edge, a circle of towering trees older than memory, their trunks thick with age, their leaves whispering in low, somber tones. Noah placed his hand upon one of the massive trunks, closing his eyes. A warmth passed through him, not from the tree, but from above, through the stillness, through the soil, through the presence. "This," Noah said softly, "is where we must begin." His wife stared up at the giant trees. You mean to cut them down? Noah lowered his head. Yes, but not in haste, not with pride, with reverence. For what we build will hold life. She nodded slowly, understanding that every step forward now was part of something larger than fear, larger than the valley, larger even than the world that trembled beneath them. Far across the land, in the city of stone and shadow, the watchers gathered on the highest platform. Their faces were pale with grief. The pulsing light of judgment painted the horizon with deep, shifting hues. Blue, gold, silver, each pulse slower, heavier, fuller than the last. The decree draws near, Ramaya said, voice low. The waters rise in the deep, the skies prepare their burden. Seriel lowered his gaze. And Noah, he is listening, Ramaya replied. He is beginning. Arak stood behind them, towering above the gathered angels, like a monument shaped from sorrow. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. If the waters come, he whispered, what becomes of us? What becomes of my mother, my brothers, my people? Seriel's expression pained him. The Creator remembers every life. Arak, even those born from broken boundaries. But the world cannot carry what has been born. It is not your fault, but the cost remains. Arak turned away, a low groan breaking from his chest. His shadow stretched long over the city, the shadow of a being caught between worlds, destined to lose both. Below, the people moved through the streets with growing fear. Some had heard the voice of judgment in their dreams. Some had woken with memories of storms they had never seen. Some whispered of giants who cried in the night. Some whispered of angels who watched with dimmed wings. And beneath it all, beneath stone and soil and fear, the deep waters stirred. Back in the valley, Noah stood beneath the ancient trees with an axe in his hand. It was a simple tool, human-made, rough around the edges, but today, as he gripped it, the weight of destiny flowed through the wood. He pressed his forehead to the nearest trunk. Forgive this, he whispered to the tree, but your strength will save what must be saved. He began the first strike. The sound echoed through the valley low, rhythmic, sacred like the heartbeat of a world preparing to change. His wife gathered stones for tools. His sons approached slowly, eyes wide with questions Noah could not yet answer. Birds scattered from the branches, circling the sky with cries that hinted at ancient instinct. With each strike of the axe, Noah felt the voice guiding him. This beam for strength, this timber for endurance, this valley for refuge. He did not yet know the full design. He did not yet understand the magnitude of what he was building, but he trusted me. As the first great tree fell crashing to the earth, with a sound that rolled across the hills, the pulse of judgment on the horizon brightened, as though acknowledging that Noah had begun. The flood was not yet here, but the world had taken its first step toward it. The days that followed moved like slow waves, gentle on the surface, heavy beneath. Noah and his family worked from dawn until the last light of evening, gathering timber, shaping beams, smoothing planks with reverent hands. Every strike of the axe, every lift of a wooden beam, every breath taken in that valley carried the same unspoken truth. Something was coming, and the world was no longer large enough to escape it. Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, watched their father with a mixture of awe and unease. They had always known him to be steady, the kind of man whose decisions were never ruled by fear. But now there was something different in his gaze, something urgent, something ancient, as though he carried instructions carved into his spirit by a hand they could not see. One evening, after hours of labor, Shem approached his father as Noah rested beside a newly cut beam. "Father," he said softly, "why this? Why is a structure so large? Why so many trees? Why now?" Noah wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at his son with gentle sorrow. "Because the voice has spoken, and it has shown me what the world refuses to see." Japheth frowned. "What voice?" "The voice that shaped the mountains," Noah whispered. the voice that breathed life into dust, the voice that mourns the violence of the earth. Ham shivered, though the air was warm. "And it told you to build this?" "Yes," Noah said, laying a hand on the rough timber beside him. "This is not a shelter. It is a vessel, a refuge, a promise." His sons exchanged uncertain glances. "But what is coming?" Shem asked. Noah's eyes darkened with the gravity of truth. "Waters, enough to wash the world clean." Ham's breath caught. Japheth stepped backward. Shem shook his head slowly. "All the world?" "All," Noah said. "Every valley, every city, every land where the people have forgotten who formed them." Silence gathered around them like a soft cloak. Even the leaves stopped rustling, as if creation itself paused to listen. At last Japheth spoke, voice trembling. "And us? What will become of us?" "You will build," Noah said gently. "You will follow. You will trust. And the one who speaks will keep you." His sons did not reply. They looked at the growing structure, still only a skeleton of beams and timber, but something in its size, in its shape, in the way it stretched across the valley floor, shook them with a fear they could not name. Far from the valley, the giants felt the shift in the earth more strongly each day. Clouds gathered unnaturally over distant mountains. Rivers ran with colder currents. Animals migrated early, moving in frantic patterns as if hurrying toward some unspoken warning. Arak sat on a cliff overlooking the great forests. His massive hands gripped the stone until it cracked. His heart ached with a weight so immense it felt like boulders stacked upon his chest. He had heard echoes of what Noah had been told. Not clearly, not as a voice, but as a tremor in his blood, a sorrow in his bones. Caird, standing a short distance away, stared at the sky with narrowed eyes. "Something is wrong," he growled. Arak nodded. "Yes." Caird huffed. "The humans speak of storms. The angels hide in the treetops. Even the birds flee. Tell me, Arak, what do you know?" Arak closed his eyes. "The world prepares to change. For us, for everyone." Caird's fists tightened. "If the heavens move against us—" "No," Arak said softly. "They move against the imbalance." Caird fell silent. Arak lifted his gaze to the dimming sky. "And we are part of that imbalance." Caird looked at him with grief, disguised as anger. "Then what becomes of us?" Arak had no answer, only a hollow ache. Back in the valley, Noah placed his hand on the unfinished frame of the vessel. Moonlight washed over the beams, turning them silver. The structure rose like the skeleton of a great creature, sprawling, immense, waiting to be clothed in purpose. As Noah stood there, the wind shifted, and the presence returned. This time, it came not as a whisper, but as a steady, resonant breath that moved through the trees, through the beams, through Noah's heart. "Noah." He bowed his head. The waters drew closer. He looked toward the horizon. The pulsing light brightened steady, relentless, mournful. "Yes," Noah whispered. "I feel it." "Continue," the voice said. "Do not stop. For every day the world grows heavier, and soon the weight must break." Noah placed both hands on the timber and felt it, the heartbeat of the world, the sorrow of heaven, the urgency of time. And he knew the flood had already begun in the unseen places. Its waters were not yet visible, but they were rising. The rains had not yet begun, but the world was already shifting beneath Noah's feet. Each morning, as he rose to continue the work, he noticed changes, small at first, then undeniable. Dew no longer glittered cheerfully on the grass. It clung instead like cold tears. The birds who once filled the valley with their songs now called out in short, frantic bursts, their melodies broken. Even the sun seemed hesitant, rising behind veils of thin mist that refused to lift. The sky carried a heaviness Noah could feel in the air, in his breath, in his bones. Still, he built. Hour after hour, day after day, Noah shaped timber according to the instructions etched into his soul. The vessel grew, stretching across the valley like the frame of a giant resting in the dust. Each beam fits with uncanny precision, as though guided by invisible hands. His sons worked beside him, Shem steady and thoughtful, Ham restless but strong, Japheth driven by both fear and faith. His wife tended to tools, food, and the small comforts that kept their home warm, even as the world chilled around them. But the valley was no longer alone. Word of Noah's work spread beyond the hills. Travelers from distant settlements approached with wide eyes and trembling voices. Some mocked him, laughing at the sheer size of the structure rising from the earth. What madness is this? A ship on land? Water cannot reach this valley. Others stared with uneasy fascination, whispering rumors of angels, giants, and judgment. They spoke of strange dreams and unsettling warnings carried on the wind. But Noah did not argue. He simply kept building. One evening, as shadows lengthened across the beams, a stranger approached. His clothes were torn, mud streaked his skin. His eyes were wild with terror. "I saw it," he whispered, gripping Noah's arm. "The sky." It opened. Noah's heart clenched. "What did you see?" "Light," the man said, voice shaking. "A light that wasn't sunlight. A light that watched us. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and the animals—" He swallowed hard. "They ran, all of them, toward the mountains, away from something." Noah guided him gently to a rock to sit. "Rest. You are safe here." But the man stared past Noah at the great vessel, dread knotting his features. "You know what it is, don't you?" His whisper trembled. "You know what's coming." Noah placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Prepare your heart, prepare your home, and listen." The man wept into his hands. Far beyond the valley, giants gathered beneath storm, dark clouds. A rock stood among them, shoulders hunched, breath heavy. The sky flickered with silver veins of lightning, silent, unnatural, as if the heavens were drawing in their last calm breaths before releasing something catastrophic. Cared, paced like a caged beast. "The air tastes wrong," he growled, "like before a great tear." Arak nodded. "The world readies itself." A smaller giant, still young, still uncertain, looked up at Arak. "Will we survive?" Arak hesitated. "I do not know." The sky pulsed again. Not lightning, judgment. Its light curved along the horizon in long, sweeping arcs, touching the treetops, reflecting in the rivers, bending around the mountains. It was not approaching quickly. It did not need to. Judgment moves with the certainty of destiny, not haste. Back in the valley, Noah hammered the final beam of the day into place. His hands were blistered, his muscles ached, but his spirit felt strangely steady like a lantern shielded from the wind. His wife approached, wrapping a cloth around his sweat-soaked shoulders. "How much longer?" she whispered. Noah looked at the structure, vast, rising, sovereign. "Until it is finished." And after that, Noah gazed toward the horizon where the light pulsed brighter, closer now, unmistakable. "After that," he said quietly, "we gather what must be saved." His wife shivered. Night fell quickly. The wind changed again, carrying the scent of distant rain. Rain not of storms, but of something older, deeper, written into the bones of creation before the world was born. Noah stood atop a high beam, gazing at the sky. The stars flickered uneasily. The earth hummed a low lament beneath him. And the presence, the same voice that had called him by name, moved gently through the valley with words that brushed against his soul like a final warning. "Noah, the time draws near." Noah closed his eyes. The flood had not yet risen, but the world was already drowning in the sound of its coming. Long before Noah lifted the first beam of the vessel, long before the giants roamed the forests as restless shadows, long before cities rose and cracked beneath their own ambition, there was a moment, quiet, forgotten when the watchers first learned what it meant to fall. But that memory had sunk beneath ages of silence. Now, as judgment approached the world, like a slow-moving tide. Those old echoes stirred again, rising from the deepest places of the earth, places where only sorrow dared to linger. High in the north, where the mountains curved like the ribs of a sleeping titan, an ancient range stood untouched by human hands. Snow crowned its sharp peaks, and the air carried a coldness that whispered of secrets buried beneath ages of stone. These were the mountains of the moon, a place where sunlight seemed to dim, where even the wind spoke in hushed tones, as though wary of waking what slept beneath. Sariel stood at the foot of this vast range, his wings dimmed, his face shadowed by grief, older than the valleys below. He had come alone. The other watchers remained scattered across the world, trying to guide, to protect, to mend what had become unraveled. But Sariel knew that before the final decree fell, he had to return to the place where the first fracture began. A faint tremor pulsed beneath his feet, steady, rhythmic, like the beating of a distant heart. He followed it, up the ancient paths, past jagged cliffs carved by forgotten waters, past icy ridges echoing with the cries of unseen beasts. Sariel climbed. His wings brushed the snow-dusted rocks. The air grew thinner. The sky dimmed to a bruised violet. The tremor grew stronger, slow, mournful, constant. He reached a plateau hidden behind a curtain of mist. The ground was bare, unbroken, except for one thing: a circular pit, unnaturally perfect, impossibly smooth, carved into the earth, like the imprint of a celestial tear. Sariel stepped toward it, heart trembling. He knew what lay below. The first prison, the oldest wound, the place where the watchers who strayed too far were bound. He knelt at the edge, feeling the cold rise from the depths like a silent plea. "Brothers," he whispered. For a long moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, only the endless cold. Then, a voice, soft, raw, torn by centuries. "Sariel." He exhaled sharply, closing his eyes as grief surged through him. The voice rose again from the pit, echoing up the stone walls like wind trapped in a cavern. "Is it time?" Sariel's fingers tightened against the ice. "Yes." Another voice, deeper, cracked like brittle rock, answered from below. "We felt the tremor. We felt the covenant break. We felt the judgment rise," whispered a third. Sariel bowed his head. "It walks the earth." Silence, not empty-filled, filled with despair, filled with memory, filled with the weight of choices that shaped the world. Another voice drifted up, heavy with remorse. "Do they know, the giants? Do they know what we carried into their making?" Sariel hesitated. Pain flickered across his face. "No," he said softly. "They only know sorrow. They know they were born into a world that could not hold them." A long, trembling breath drifted from the pit. "And the humans? They fear what they do not understand," Sariel murmured. "But they do not see the whole truth." A whisper replied, "They will. When the waters rise, all will be revealed." Sariel looked down into the darkness, eyes burning with tears. "Forgive us," he whispered. "Forgive what we began." "Forgiveness," one voice answered gently, "belongs to the one who judges, not to those who broke the order." Sariel's breath quivered. "Will the chains hold when the deep is broken open?" "Yes," the voices murmured, overlapping like layered echoes. "We cannot rise, we cannot flee, we cannot undo what has been done." Sariel pressed his palm to the cold stone. The tremor beneath the earth pulsed again, slower now, weaker, like a dying heartbeat. "Rest," he whispered. "The world changes soon." "And you," the first voice replied, "must stand where we fell." Sariel lifted his gaze to the storm-dark horizon, where the pulsing light of judgment grew brighter with every passing hour. "I will," he said, and with wings folded in mourning, he turned from the prison beneath the mountains, the place where the watchers of old slept in sorrow, and began his descent toward the world, trembling below. The descent from the mountains of the moon felt heavier than the climb. Sariel's wings dragged with a weight he'd never known, not the weight of exhaustion, for angels do not tire, but the weight of memory. Each step carried centuries of regret, and each breath echoed the voices of his bound brethren, rising from the pit like ancient ghosts, whispering warnings into the wind. The sky lowered as he made his way down the narrow path, clouds hanging thick as wool. They pressed close to the peaks, dimming the faint sunlight until the world felt caught between dusk and dawn, a suspended hour, waiting for something inevitable. Sariel paused on a rocky outcrop and turned his gaze toward the distant valleys. Faintly, through the haze, he could see the flickering glow of human fires, the winding lines of rivers, the silhouettes of wandering giants. Life continued, unaware of the chains buried deep beneath the mountains or the sorrow that pulsed within their links. But Sariel knew, and he knew that soon the world would know too. A cold wind howled suddenly, swirling around the cliffside like a mourning cry. Sariel steadied himself, sensing a presence, not one of heaven nor earth, but something in between, something that watched from afar, something that felt the cracks in the world widening. He whispered into the wind, "Do not hasten. The world is not ready." But judgment does not listen to the pleas of angels. Far below the mountains, Noah worked with his sons in the valley, stretching long planks across the rib-like beams of the vessel. The structure grew each day, its silhouette rising like a great beast awakening from sleep. Travelers who passed through the valley stared at its growing shape with awe and suspicion. Some laughed at Noah's strange devotion. Others whispered of a madness carried by the wind. A few turned pale and fled, unwilling to stay near something that felt too much like prophecy given form. Noah's sons labored with determination, though fear gnawed at them silently. Their father's certainty steadied them, but the world itself seemed to resist understanding. The sky darkened unpredictably, winds shifted without reason, birds flew in frantic patterns overhead. The earth groaned softly at night, as though arching its back in discomfort beneath the weight of a coming storm. One afternoon, as Noah inspected a beam for imperfections, Shem approached him with a troubled expression. "Father," he said quietly, "the men from the northern village returned." Noah looked up, and they said the mountains shook. They said the snow cracked. They said the sky glowed as if fire hid behind the clouds. A chill slid down Noah's spine. Ham joined, face pale. They said, they heard, voices. Noah's heart tightened. He understood. He did not know the whole truth, but he felt the threads connecting. The world was straining. The chains beneath the mountains, chains he did not know existed, were trembling under the pressure of heaven's sorrow. He placed a hand on his son's shoulders. "Listen to me," he said gently. "Do not fear what you do not understand. The one who speaks will guide us. Trust that." They nodded, though their eyes betrayed their uncertainty. At the foot of the mountains of the moon, giants had gathered, drawn by the strange tremors that rippled through the earth. Arak stood tall among them, his expression carved with worry. Kered crouched near the ground, pressing his ear against the cold soil. "There are voices beneath us," Kered muttered. Arak nodded. "Yes, I feel them too." "Who are they?" the younger giant asked. Arak lifted his gaze to the towering peaks. "Not who, what came before us." Kered's eyes narrowed. "The earth groans as if it longs to break open." Arak felt a shiver pass through him. Something lies below, something ancient, something bound. A deep rumble echoed from the mountains, low, distant, and mournful. The giants froze. Birds fled from the treetops in panicked clouds. Even the clouds above seemed to vibrate with the sound. Arak stepped back, fear tightening around his massive heart. "This is not for us to discover, but it is for us to feel," Kered whispered. And they did feel it, in their bones, in their blood, in the trembling earth beneath their feet. The world was remembering its chains, and chains, once remembered, never stay silent. As Sariel finally reached the base of the mountain range, he tilted his head toward the sky. The pulsing light of judgment glowed brighter, now closer, more insistent. He whispered into the darkening air, "No more delays." For he knew the truth. The heavens would not wait. The deep would not sleep. The chains beneath the mountains of the moon would not hold forever. And the world, fragile beneath the weight of angelic choices, trembled in anticipation of what would come next. Night spread over the land like a slow unfurling cloth, dark and heavy, stitched with uneasy starlight. The pulse on the horizon, the silent heartbeat of judgment, glowed through the distant haze, casting a pale shimmer across rivers and forests. It was brighter now than ever before, a constant reminder that time was thinning, that heaven's patience, though immense, was drawing toward its final breath. In the valley where Noah worked, the vessel's silhouette rose like an immense shadow, its ribs curving upward as though reaching for heaven itself. Lanterns flickered around it, glowing like fireflies caught in the hands of night. Noah's family had grown used to working through dusk, their hands shaping timber by the gentle light of flame. Yet tonight, something felt different. Their tools felt heavier, the air felt colder, the silence around them felt listening. Japheth paused mid-strike, glancing toward the mountains. "Father," he whispered, "do you hear that?" Noah straightened slowly. At first, he heard nothing. Then, a low hum reached them, soft as a moan swallowed by distance. It rose and fell, like the world itself was sighing through its ancient bones. Ham shivered. "It sounds like the earth is grieving." Noah's face tightened. "Stay close. Tonight is not like other nights." His words barely finished when a strange wind swept through the valley, cold but without movement, whispering but without sound. It curled around Noah first, then around his sons, then along the beams of the vessel. The lantern flames flickered violently, trembling as though frightened. Shem whispered, "Is it the angel?" Noah shook his head, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "No, this is something older. Far above the valley, on the first rising slopes of the mountains of the moon, Arak moved with heavy steps. The rumbling from beneath the earth had drawn him like a memory calling out from deep sleep. The giants gathered around him, some afraid, some angry, all trembling with a confusion they couldn't articulate. They felt the vibrations through their bones more clearly than humans, more clearly even than some angels. They were born of a boundary, after all, born from the fault line between realms. Kerad approached Arak, his massive fists clenched. "The mountains speak," he growled. "They call us." Arak stared at the peaks, where moonlight glinted off jagged edges. "No, they do not call us. They warn us." Another young giant stepped forward. "What is beneath them? Why do we feel its sorrow?" Arak lowered his head. He did not know the full truth, but the echo inside him answered anyway. "Something bound. Something that remembers what we are." Cairde's voice dropped to a whisper. "Something that knows our beginning." Before Arak could answer, the ground beneath them trembled sharply, hard enough to make even the giants stagger. Snow fell from the higher rocks in quiet avalanches. The trees swayed. The air buzzed with unseen energy. And then, a single sound rose from the mountain's depths. A sound not heard by human ears in ages. A sound like chains scraping against stone. Every giant froze. Arak's breath caught. Cairde's eyes widened. "What was that?" whispered the young one. Arak swallowed hard. A memory, waking. At the base of the mountains, Sariel felt the quake before the sound reached him. His wings unfurled slightly, reacting to the ancient tremor with instinctive dread. He had hoped no. He had prayed that the chains would remain silent until the decree fell fully. But the earth had other ideas. The world itself was responding, like a wounded body, sensing the approach of its final hour. He pressed his palm to the soil. "Not yet," he murmured. "Please, not yet." But the ground only answered with the faint rattle of those distant chains. He lifted his head and looked toward Noah's valley. "It is time," he whispered. Far away, Noah felt the tremor under his bare feet. He steadied himself against the wooden ribs of the vessel. His sons clung to the beams, eyes wide with fear. Shem whispered, "What is happening?" Noah didn't speak. He felt it in the soil, in the air, in his bones. Something ancient had stirred. Something beneath the mountains had remembered its chains. Something bound had turned its face toward the world once more. And as the pulse of judgment brightened across the horizon, Noah knew this truth with absolute clarity. The waters were closer now, not yet visible, but rising, rising in the deep, rising in the unseen places, rising in the sorrow of heaven and the trembling bones of the earth. The chains beneath the mountains of the moon were stirring, and when chains stir, the world prepares to break. The trembling did not fade with the night. It deepened slowly, steadily, like the heartbeat of a great creature stirring beneath the soil. By dawn, the valley lay under a veil of pale, uneasy light. Dew clung thick to the grass, heavy as tears. The air tasted metallic, as if storm winds had brushed across a place untouched by rain. Noah rose before the sun, as he always did, but today the stillness around him felt different. It wasn't peace, it was anticipation. He walked toward the vessel, its great frame looming against the dim morning. Each beam seemed to hum faintly, resonating with the trembling earth beneath. Noah placed a hand against the wood and felt, if only for an instant, that something vast watched him from the unseen places. His sons approached quietly, their faces drawn with sleepless worry. Shem carried rope. Ham held a fresh-cut plank. Japheth kept glancing at the mountains, unable to shake the feeling that they were somehow alive. "Father," Japheth whispered, "something moved last night, in the deep places. I could feel it beneath my bed." "So could I," Ham added, his voice low, as if the earth was breathing differently. Noah nodded slowly. "It was not your imagination. The world prepares itself." "For what?" Shem asked. "The waters." Noah's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the pulse of judgment glowed through a veil of morning haze. "For everything. High in the mountains, where night still clung stubbornly to the jagged peaks, Iraq and the giants gathered again. None had slept, none could. The sound of chains beneath the earth had woven through their dreams like a cold thread, binding them in restless dread. Cared paced back and forth along the ledge, his movements sending loose stones tumbling into the abyss below. "This place is wrong," he growled. "I feel called or judged. I cannot tell which." A young giant pressed his hands over his ears. "The chains," he whispered. "I still hear them, even now, scraping, dragging, like something trying to rise." Arak stepped to the edge and stared at the peaks shrouded in mist. The tremors traveled up through the stone into his legs, up into his chest, up into the place where sorrow had carved a permanent dwelling. "It is not trying to rise," he said quietly. "It is remembering." Cared frowned. "Remembering what?" "The cost," Arak murmured, "of being like us." The giants looked at him with confusion, but Arak said no more. He could not tell them what he felt rising from the depths. He could not describe the echo in his bones, an echo that did not belong to him alone, but to every Nephilim born of heaven's rupture. Sariel arrived at the base of the mountain just as the first true crack split across the stone. A faint line of blue-white light glowed in its wake, cold, unearthly, ancient. He pressed a trembling hand against the rock. "Hold," he whispered. "Please hold." But the mountains did not answer him. Angels do not fear many things, yet Sariel felt something close to fear now. Fear not of wrath, but of inevitability. The elders bound beneath the mountains had warned him. The chains would not break, but they would tremble. And when they trembled, The world would tremble with them. He closed his eyes and whispered into the wind, "Noah, be swift." Back in the valley, Noah's wife knelt beside the vessel, her hands resting on the wood, as if she could feel the future through its fibers. The wind had grown colder, sharper, threading through her hair like icy fingers. She heard the distant rumble, the shifting of mountains miles away, and a chill swept through her. "Noah," she called softly. He turned. "Will we be ready?" she asked. Noah's expression softened with both sorrow and certainty. "We must be." He walked toward her and took her hands in his. "The voice has shown me only pieces, but I know this. We have been chosen not to escape the storm, but to carry life through it." Her eyes shimmered. "And the giants, the cities, the people who mocked you, what will become of them?" Noah bowed his head. "The one who judges will decide every fate. None will be forgotten." A gust of wind surged across the valley, then strong, sudden, cold enough to sting the skin. It carried with it the unmistakable scent of distant rain. Not ordinary rain. Rain waiting in the chambers of heaven. Rain born from judgment. The pulse on the horizon flared bright, sorrowful, undeniable. The deep trembled again. The chains remembered their burden, and the mountains exhaled a cold breath from their ancient wounds. Noah looked up at the sky. "It begins," he whispered, "not the flood, not yet, but the shifting, the breaking, the sorrow of heaven, descending into the bones of the earth." And far beneath the mountains of the moon, where the watchers once stepped beyond their place, the chains rattled one final warning before the waters began their slow awakening. Before the first raindrop ever touched the earth, before the skies split open and the deep roared upward, the world entered a strange, trembling quiet. It was not peace, it was not calm. It was the silence that settled before a great unveiling, the breath the universe takes before speaking a truth too heavy for ordinary sound. This silence drifted across valleys, over forests, through cities, and into the hidden dens of giants. It brushed the surface of rivers until their waters stilled. It curled beneath doorways into homes where families whispered uneasy prayers. It wrapped around the vessel, taking shape in Noah's valley, as though studying its form, measuring its purpose, weighing the destiny it was crafted to hold. And in that silence, the world remembered. It remembered the first light that touched the mountains. It remembered the first breath poured into the lungs of humanity. It remembered the first tears of heaven when angels crossed forbidden boundaries. It remembered the laughter of giants before sorrow carved its name into their hearts. It remembered the covenant broken, trembling, longing to be restored. Noah felt the silence long before anyone else. It pressed softly against his spirit as he worked, shaping the vessel with his sons, his hands steady, even as the world seemed to shiver around him. Each plank he placed felt as though it belonged not to wood, but to prophecy. Each nail he drove felt like a heartbeat, preparing for something immense. Each breath he took carried the weight of the world unraveling. As he worked, animals gathered at the edges of the grove, silent, watchful, drawn by a force older than instinct. They came in small clusters at first, deer with wide, trembling eyes, birds that perched on beams without fear, foxes whose paws made no sound upon the fallen leaves. Noah did not drive them away. He simply nodded, as though he had expected them. In truth, he had. For the voice had whispered to him that when the time grew near, creation would begin to choose its own survivors. One afternoon, as Noah examined the hull's growing curve, a tremor rippled through the ground. It was gentle, almost polite, but deep enough that dust rose from the earth in a thin cloud. Noah placed his hand on the soil and bowed his head. "It hears," he murmured. His wife approached quietly. "What hears?" "The deep," Noah whispered. "It listens for the command." She took a shaky breath. "And when it hears it?" Noah rose slowly, eyes distant. "The world will split." Just then a shadow fell across them. Noah turned to see Sariel, standing near the vessel, wings half-folded, face drawn with ancient sorrow. His presence dimmed the sunlight, not with darkness, but with the gravity of what he carried. "Noah," the angel said softly. Noah bowed. "Is it time?" "Not yet," Sariel replied. "But soon. The heavens draw closer with every breath. The deep stirs with every tremor." Noah glanced toward the horizon, where the pulsing light of judgment grew brighter each day. "And the giants?" Sariel's wings lowered. "Some wander in confusion, others rage, many grieve. They feel the coming change, though they do not yet understand it." "Will they be saved?" Noah asked quietly. The angel looked at him with grief etched into every line of his celestial face. "Their fate lies between what was meant and what became. Judgment weighs their hearts, but the world was not shaped to hold them." Noah closed his eyes. "Then mercy is in the hands of the one who sees all." Sariel finished. The silence deepened around them, settling between the planks of the vessel, between the trees, between the breaths of every creature in the valley. It was no longer the silence of waiting. It was the silence of prophecy of a truth, unfolding exactly as it was written before time learned to move. Noah lifted his gaze toward the sky. Clouds were gathering not gray, but pale gold, shimmering faintly as though lit from within. They moved with purpose, shaping patterns that made no sense to the human eye. But Noah understood. The heavens were drawing near. Sariel stepped closer, voice low. "When the silence breaks, Noah, the world will never sound the same again." Noah nodded. "Then let us finish before the silence ends." The angel's wings stirred the air as he stepped back. "Continue your work and listen, for the prophecy approaches." And deep within the mountains, beneath chains older than memory, something shifted, a final warning, a final ache, a final breath before the storm. The silence began to press more deeply into the world, not as emptiness, but as a gathering weight. It felt like a hand resting gently over the earth's mouth, urging it to be still, to listen, to remember. Even the wind, which had once played carelessly through the trees, moved now with slow, deliberate strokes, as if afraid to disturb whatever truth hovered just beyond sight. Noah worked beneath this heavy quiet with renewed urgency. Each beam placed upon the vessel echoed through the valley like a muffled drumbeat. Shem fastened ropes with trembling hands. Ham shaped planks with shoulders tight from worry. Japheth lifted timber with a strength he didn't know he had. None of them spoke much. Words felt too fragile for the air that surrounded them. It wasn't fear that silenced them. It was reverence. It was the growing certainty that they were building not only for themselves, but for the world. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills and washed the sky in amber light, Noah paused mid-lift. He set the beam down and turned slowly, his breath held in his chest. Animals had gathered again, but this time it was no small cluster. It was a multitude, creatures from distant forests and hidden valleys, beasts from mountains and plains, birds from every direction. They stood along the edges of the grove, in complete stillness, eyes fixed upon the great vessel rising from the earth. Lions lay beside deer, neither flinching. Wolves stood near sheep without hunger in their gaze. Eagles perched upon the highest beams, wings folded in solemn understanding. Noah's wife stepped beside him, hand covering her mouth. They know." Noah nodded. "The voice has reached them too," Ham whispered. "But how? They do not speak." "They feel," Noah said quietly, "sometimes more clearly than we do." Several birds took flight, then slow, graceful arcs, as if marking the air with unseen patterns. A pair of dogs stepped forward, heads bowed, and touched their noses gently to the lowest beam of the vessel. A great bear rose on its hind legs and exhaled a deep rumble, not of threat, but of recognition. Even the insects moved in, ordered swarms, circling the vessel as though preparing it for what was to come. Shem shuddered. "Father, this doesn't feel natural." Noah gazed at the gathering life. each creature lit by the soft light of the dying Sunday. "It isn't," he said. "It's divine." Above them, the sky darkened in a strange way, not with storm clouds, not with nightfall, but with a soft, golden dimness, as if a veil had been pulled across the heavens. When Noah lifted his eyes, he saw faint, shimmering lines forming in the sky, moving slowly, bending gently, like the brushstrokes of a painter whose hand shaped worlds. He felt his heart rise in his throat. "It is beginning," he whispered. Sariel emerged from the shadows at the edge of the grove, his presence more solemn than ever. His wings hung low, as though the very air had become too heavy, even for an angel. "Noah," he said softly, "there is little time now." Noah's sons stiffened. His wife clasped his hand. The animals went silent once more. Sariel stepped toward them. "The heavens have held their breath for long enough. The deep stirs beneath continents. The chains beneath the mountains tremble with the memory of disobedience. The giant cities groan under the weight of their own pride. And judgment," his voice faltered, wings trembling, "judgment walks closer with every heartbeat." Noah exhaled slowly, gripping the vessel's frame. "How long?" Sariel looked toward the horizon, where the pulsing light grew brighter, closer, its rhythm overriding even the silence. "Soon. The first sound will shatter the quiet, and when it does, the world will understand." A faint rumble rolled through the valley, so soft that only Noah and Sariel truly heard it. The rumble of waters rising in the deep. Noah's wife pressed against him. His sons exchanged terrified glances. Noah swallowed the lump in his throat. "We will finish, even if the sky falls while we work." Sariel nodded. "And creation will move with you. The animals will know when to enter. The winds will guide your hands." But when the silence breaks, his eyes dimmed with sorrow, too heavy to hide. "The world will not know itself." Noah gazed at the vessel unfinished, massive, waiting like a breath caught in the chest of creation. The silence thickened. The sky dimmed further. The ground trembled once, and Noah whispered into the falling dusk, "Let me be ready." The night that followed settled over the valley like a veil drawn by unseen hands. It was darker than any night Noah had ever known, not because the stars were absent, but because their light seemed muted, as if they too were listening for something. The moon hung low and pale, casting a thin silver glow that touched the vessel's rising frame and turned it into a quiet monument against the trembling world. Noah lay awake long after his family slept. He could feel the silence pressing inward, wrapping itself around his spirit like a cloak woven from prophecy. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before revelation, the kind that arrives when the world stands on the threshold of a promise and a judgment. He stepped outside, barefoot on cool earth. The valley stretched before him in stillness. The trees did not sway. The grass did not stir. The animals that had gathered earlier now rested in scattered forms, curled, perched, breathing slowly, as if awaiting a summons from the deep places of creation. Noah lifted his gaze to the sky. The shimmering patterns from earlier remained faint but present, moving slowly, eternally, like the memory of something the heavens had once spoken aloud. And beneath that celestial dance, the pulse of judgment glowed brighter than the stars, its rhythm no longer distant. It beat like a drum across the edges of the world. And then, quietly, the voice returned. "Noah." The sound came not from above, but from everywhere, earth, sky, breath, heart. It filled the valley like dawn rising behind closed eyes. Noah fell to his knees, palms pressed into the cool soil. "Yes, Lord." "The time draws near," the voice said. "The silence will break. When it does, the skies will release their burden, and the deep will rise to meet them." Noah's breath trembled. "Are we ready?" "You listen," the voice replied. "You obey. That is readiness in its purest form." Noah bowed his head. The voice continued, softer now, like a father speaking to a child who must walk a path of fire. "The world has forgotten my breath. It has forgotten my light. It has forgotten harmony. But you, Noah, you remember. Tears blurred Noah's sight. "What must I do next?" he whispered. There was a moment of stillness, long and profound. Then the voice answered, "Gather the living." Noah lifted his head, heart pounding. "All of them?" "A remnant," the voice said. "Two of each kind that I send to you. Those I choose will come without coercion. They will hear the whisper woven into their blood, the same whisper you hear in your spirit." Noah swallowed hard. "And the giants?" The voice dimmed with sorrow. "They were born of an unbalanced world. Their footsteps crack the harmony they long for. Their fate rests in the hands of the judgment that approaches." Noah closed his eyes, grief expanding inside him, wide and deep. "You will gather what can be carried," the voice continued. "You will shelter what must endure. You will hold the light of the first breath in your obedience." Noah bowed low, forehead touching the soil. "I will do as you command." As the presence faded, the silence around him deepened in a way he had never felt before. Dense, trembling, fragile, it hummed with the weight of what was coming. And above the valley, the faintest sound rippled across the sky. Not thunder, not wind, but a distant, ancient note, like a crack, forming across the surface of creation's quiet. Noah rose slowly, eyes fixed on the heavens. The stars flickered with unease. The golden veil of clouds shifted, and the animals stirred from their sleep. He whispered into the trembling night, "It begins." Far from the valley, in the cities built by ambition, people woke in fear. Some claimed they heard the mountains groan. Others swore the rivers spoke. Fires flickered without wind. Infants cried out in their sleep. Elders clutched their chests, whispering forgotten prayers. And in the forests where giants wandered, Arak lifted his face to the sky with a heaviness that felt like farewell. The silence was breaking, not with chaos, not with violence, but with prophecy stepping out of the shadows. And the world, every valley, every city, every mountain, felt the breath of something ancient and unstoppable drawing closer. The silence finally began to fracture, not with thunder, not with wind, but with a sound so soft, so ancient, that only the earth itself could truly hear it, the first sigh of breaking prophecy. It drifted across the mountains like a breath, exhaled from the deep. It curled through the forests where giants sat motionless beneath trembling trees. It slipped into the cities of men, where ambition had built towers too tall for their foundations. And it settled into Noah's valley like the first ripple before a great wave. Noah felt it immediately. He stood beside the vessel with his sons, overseeing the last of the interior beams, when a sudden stillness swept across the grove. The tools in their hands felt suddenly foreign, as though the world had changed between one heartbeat and the next. The air thickened, the sky dimmed. The ground shivered beneath their feet in a trembling that felt like a held breath finally released. Shem looked at his father. "What was that?" Noah didn't answer. He was already listening. From deep beneath the soil, beneath rock, beneath caverns, beneath ancient chambers where secrets slept, came a low, resonant groan, a sound like stone bending, a sound like the ribs of the world shifting under their own burden. Ham stepped back in fear. "The earth, it sounds alive." Noah turned his gaze toward the distant mountains, where faint pulses of golden light flickered like distant lanterns beneath the sky. "It remembers," he whispered. High in the forests, Arak froze mid-stride. The tremor rolled through his bones, awakening a sorrow so deep it made his massive hands tremble. He felt the vibration from the center of the world, the same vibration that had haunted his dreams for months. The chains beneath the mountains of the moon were no longer merely stirring, they were responding. Caird stumbled beside him, gripping a tree that snapped beneath his weight. "What is happening? What is this sound?" Arak swallowed hard. "The world is preparing." "For what?" Arak lifted his gaze to the trembling sky. for the voice of the deep. The younger giants trembled, some in fear, some in awe. Even the strongest among them bowed their heads. They were creations born from imbalance, born from love and error entwined, and the world was groaning beneath the weight of their existence. Yet Arak felt no anger, only grief. He whispered into the air, "Forgive us," and far above the treetops, an unseen presence heard him. Sariel stood upon a ridge overlooking Noah's valley, his wings unfolding in slow, mournful arcs. His divine radiance dimmed as he surveyed the shifting heavens. Clouds spiraled in unnatural patterns. The golden veil thickened, swirling in great circles like the breath of a sleeping giant. Each pulse of light beats with the rhythm of judgment, slow, steady, inevitable. "The silence is ending," Sariel murmured. A second angel landed beside him, wings quivering. "The decree is formed." Sariel closed his eyes. "Then the deep will answer." They watched as the sky began to shift, as the unseen breath of heaven stirred the high clouds, as the first invisible ripple traveled across the dome of the sky toward Noah's valley. In the valley, Noah felt the change settle against his spirit, like a hand laid gently, sorrowfully upon his shoulder. He turned to his sons. "The time has come." The air grew heavier. The animals stirred, rising to their feet with uncanny unity. Birds took to the air, circling the vessel in widening arcs. Wolves and deer approached the structure side by side, unafraid. Noah's wife stepped beside him, her hand slipping into his. "What do we do?" "We open the vessel," Noah said softly, "and we prepare to receive what the Lord sends." Shem moved toward the great ramp. Japheth gathered tools. Ham steadied a trembling goat. Then the first sound broke the silence. A low, distant rumble rolled across the sky, deeper than thunder, older than storms. It came from everywhere at once, above, below, within. The animals cried out in unison. The giants in the forests fell to their knees. The angels bowed their heads, and humans in distant cities covered their ears, weeping without understanding why. The voice spoke not in words, but in an echo that carried meaning older than language. "It is time." Noah felt tears fill his eyes, not from terror, but from awe. He opened the vessel's great door. The animals began to enter, two by two, guided by an instinct woven into creation from the beginning of time. Birds fluttered into the upper chambers. Larger beasts stepped into the lower halls. Insects hummed across the beams like threads, weaving a tapestry. And all the while, the deep groans, the mountains trembled, the horizon pulsed. The silence had become a prophecy, and prophecy had begun to awaken. Noah took his wife's hand and whispered, "Whatever comes, we walk with the one who called us." Above them, the sky darkened. The first raindrop, cold and heavy, struck the dust at Noah's feet. The world inhaled sharply. The flood remembered every name.